microphones are live.
Thank you.
I don't know if you heard him.
I did. But I appreciate the additional stuff.
Okay.
All right, excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Select Board. We are here in the Public Safety Complex. Today is Tuesday, May 28th, and the time is currently 6:09 p.m. So I'm going to just start quickly. We do have an executive session to follow our regular meeting agenda items to conduct strategy in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, being the police lieutenant contract pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21-2, to conduct strategy in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, being the town administrator pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21-2, and then also to conduct contract negotiations with non-union personnel, being the town administrator pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21, you guessed it, 2. So we have just a few quick consent items to get through, and then we have our joint meeting with Planning Board. So bear with me just 5 minutes while we go through these, and then we'll get going. So I have 5 consent items. I will read them. Number 1 is to approve the meeting minutes from the regular meeting held on May 14th, 2024. Number 2 is to approve the meeting minutes from the executive session held on May 14th, 2024. Number 3 is to approve the meeting minutes from the regular meeting held on May 17th, 2024. Number 4 is a request from Paxton Center School to use the town common for their annual concert to be held on June 4th with a rain date of June 5th. And number 5 is to appoint Adley Atanian as an election officer for a term ending August 15th, 2024. Are there any objections to any of the consent items?
No.
Hearing none, I declare that they are all approved. So not even 5 minutes.
Perfect.
So do you want to open a meeting?
Yes, at this point, the planning board will call to order, I guess, our meeting. We have 3 members present. We have one who is absent, and then we have an opening, which is the reason for the meeting tonight, to see if we can find an appointee through next May. So I guess, is that where we're starting, or are we going to start with the...
So I think, as Donna mentioned, for the interviews, because I think Neil has to leave before 7 o'clock, so he's just concerned about getting through at least the interview piece. We do have Jason with us this evening already, and then I believe Bruno is planning to join us around 6:45.
All right, so with that, then, why don't we start with Jane? So, if that's, all right, so Jane Wyrick is here. She's been working with us as the consultant from the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission on the rewriting or reviewing and rewriting of these zoning bylaws for the town of Paxton. So I guess, did you all receive your packet of the 5 talking points?
Yes.
Or that we're going to go over? All right, are there questions? We'll let Jane, I'll turn it over to her in a minute, but if there are questions, we just want to make sure we get them answered for you in the allotted time.
I don't have any specific questions off the top.
Okay. Carol, you good?
I'm okay for now, yeah.
And Kurt, you're good?
Yeah.
All right, so Jane, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you to start with whatever. Are we PowerPointing, or are we just?
So we're just going to go through the memo, Neil.
Okay.
Pretty basic, and actually, I'm going to steal it away from Jane first and let Jane fill in. I think that's okay with Jane.
You want her at the podium?
No, I want Jane to be comfortable because I want her to come back.
That's true, we do.
Yes, yes, we do. All right, so I did send a memo out to the Select Board. I have not put this on the web yet, so it will go up on the web under the TA meeting materials. And as we talked about previously, we will create a section, I don't remember if we already had, for the zoning bylaw rewrite. So we'll add that there as well, so people can go look at it if they're interested. And if not, hopefully, when it gets closer to a town meeting where this stuff is discussed, the information will be available, and hopefully people will take a look at it. So I just went through the basics of where we were. So we started this around sometime last year in 2023. We have been meeting as kind of a group, not so much a committee, more so a steering group. We have Neil from the Planning Board. We have Roberta, who's the chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Cheryl's been at almost every single meeting. Jane has been joining us, as well as a gentleman named Gabe from CMRPC, and sometimes we have a gentleman named
Mike.
Mike with us as well. Mike does more of the subdivision rules and regs section. We've also had various folks join us from the town, including people who've weighed in offline, which has been Tara from the Light Company. We've also had Mike, the fire chief, Mike Pintori, the fire chief with us. Travis from DPW has been there a few times. Dave Carl joined us a few times early on. So we've kind of tried to group in anyone who these zoning bylaws would affect from the municipal level together so we could talk about these. Folks who may not recall, what our mission was we had received a $75,000 earmark from the state last year in order to do our zoning bylaw rewrite, as well as to address our MBTA zoning bylaw requirement per the Mass General laws relative to a rural adjacent, MBTA rural adjacent community. Awesome. Just looking at Jane to make sure I got all that right. It is a mouthful. So for this evening, what we want to do is kind of just run through with the select board 5 areas that we really thought were important to make sure that all of you were on board with and we were going the right direction. We've been working on this for over a year at this point, just about a year at this point. We are wrapping up all of the work I think the group can do before it's time to turn everything over to the planning board for their part, right? Holding hearings, doing any public information sessions in which we involve Jane or any other members of the working group, try to get the information out there, also answer questions, make any changes we need to make. So at this point, there's 5 major subject areas that we thought would be relevant to go over with everyone to let you know where we are and how it came about. So I won't spend a long time going through every piece of the memo, but for those at home who want to read this, please, by all means, I'll get it up as soon as I can, either tonight or first thing tomorrow. But there's different sections, right? So for each subject matter, we have what is it, why is it important, what is it currently, what's the proposed change, what decisions do we need from SB tonight, and what are the recommendations by the zoning update group or committee. So the first one we have here is the zoning maps. So the zoning maps are important because it tells us where we can have business in town and where we can have residential and commercial in town. Right now, for anyone who recalls the look of the zoning map, and I don't have it on here, but I can always go find it if I need to, it's spotty zoning, right? Like we have pieces in the town center, around like town hall area that are zoned for business, and we have spots going out 122 down to Worcester. The idea when we had discussed this, we had looked at a couple different options, and if you go down here a little bit further in the memo, we talk about the different options here and decisions for the select board. So the reason this came up in the first place, other than the redo of the zoning bylaws, was because we keep getting the question all the time, right? Are we attractive to business? Are we open to having businesses come to town? How come we don't have more businesses? Well, one of the first impediments that you look at in a town is what is your zoning, right? If you're not zoned for business, you're not going to really encourage business because there's no place to put me. Why would I come there? The other problem we run into is some of the businesses we have in town have ran into roadblocks in the past where they've tried to make upgrades or changes, but they're not really zoned for business in the location they are in the first place, so they haven't been able to do any of those changes or upgrades. So the questions before the select board tonight are essentially, let me back up. What is the proposed change? The proposed change would amend the zoning in the town center along Route 122 to the Worcester line to business and in the residential zoning in town center. So it would be business and residential zoning, so dual purpose zoning. It would be all of town center, all the way out to 122 in Worcester, right? So it would clean up the spotty zoning piece. It would make it consistent, also open up more property options that don't currently exist for that purpose. The zoning update, or our steering committee recommended the approval of the proposed zoning map changes to expand business zoning along Route 122 from the town center eastward to the Worcester line and to amend residential zoning in town center to eliminate lots with split zoning. So as I understand it, what that means is if there's a lot now that's currently touching Pleasant Street, for instance, right? We would want to make sure that the entire lot, so say one lot is, only 1 acre, one lot is 4 acres. That entire lot we'd want to be zoned as the residential / business zoning, right? For the purposes of, if you buy the property, you want to be able to use it all for the same purpose. You don't want split zoning. It's just not encouraged. The decisions for the select board tonight, we have, should we change the current zoning maps at all? Should we make the zoning change from the town center to Worcester line as proposed? Should we expand further and do the entire run of 122 from Worcester down to Rutland? Should we amend the zoning in the town center so there are no lots with split zoning? So I know you guys have had a very short opportunity to review this, because I think I talked about it, but I didn't send it out, I think, till yesterday. What say you? Are there questions? Jane, did I cover everything on that correctly?
Pretty much. The one thing I want to clarify is currently in the zoning, there's a 1,500-foot radius circle around the center for the GRA zoning, I believe it is. And some of the lots that are right on the border of that radius are part GRA and part GRB, so those are split. So what we did was change some of them so they're either all GRA or all GRB.
Okay.
Just, it would cause a problem, I think, if those people wanted to make any changes. The question is, which zone are they in?
Okay. I'd also like to add, we're trying to inform you which way we're going. The ultimate decision is by the citizens of the town.
Sure.
So now we want your approval or your, yes, that we accept this and think you should go forward with this. And we can, now is still the working stage that we can change anything. But it's important right now that the citizens in town realize that it's their town and it's their zoning, and the more informed they are, the better it will be for everyone.
Okay. And so the steering group, Neil, were you a participant on the steering group, right? And it sounds to me
Yes.
like the steering group is proposing that we go ahead and expand the zoning map, at least down to the city line in terms of business zoning.
Correct,
And then potentially also the other direction toward Rutland.
correct.
Okay. So I can tell you my personal opinion. First of all, are there any questions that you guys want to ask before I?
No.
Questions?
My personal opinion is absolutely to expand the zoning from the, where the current business district down to the city line. Going the other direction, you start hitting some sort of agricultural properties, and that's, I don't know how that would play in terms of,
That's fine.
so that's my only concern about going the other direction, is that there are some properties down that direction that are more agricultural in nature. But I'm interested to hear what anybody has to think.
Kirk, you've been in zoning, so.
I'm comfortable with going from Worcester to Rutland,
Okay,
honestly. Yeah, there is some agricultural, but they've been there for a long time. I don't see that changing. Maybe
Yep.
that opens some opportunities for them.
it very well
That we
might, it's a
haven't
valid
considered.
point, yep. Right,
And as far as the circle around the center of town, I do agree that we should try to make that more open as well.
So with that, would we no longer need special permits in the town centre?
Well, yes, so let's back up a little bit here. So the current zoning is, if you take the monument on the common, and we draw a 1,500-foot circle around that, that's residential A.
yep,
So that's all there. What we've found in reviewing some of this is you have some lots that are at the edge of that 1,500-foot circle that are considered residential A, but the back part of it or a portion may be in residential B. So residential B requires 60,000 square feet. Residential A requires, I think it's 20,000 square feet, if I'm correct? 25,000? Anyway, so it's smaller. So at this point, we want to get rid of, instead of making it a clean circle, if you have a residential A lot, but it's split with B, we're going to make it B.
okay.
We're going to give you that, we're going to help you with that. Now, in terms of business, we're looking at properties right now that only are going to be touching 122. So if you have a lot, then let's go beyond Grove Street. Let's start at that point, just going south toward Worcester. If you have a lot that faces on 122, that would, if this is approved by the town, that would allow those individual lots to be zoned as residential/business. So if somebody were to want to sell their lot and somebody wanted to put a business in, as long as it meets the requirements of what we're looking for now in terms of a business sector, they may end up buying 2 or 3 or 4 lots. I don't know, but anyway, that's where we're going to increase or to make it more business-friendly. And one of the things, Heather, I just wanted to mention, Jeremy Richards is here. He sat on the committee with us from the economic development side of where we want to go. So we're all trying to work together here to increase the ability of becoming more business-friendly. So that's the ultimate goal here. So this is the first step in that, is to increase that. Now, in terms of where we are zoning right now, business, you would start at what I'm going to refer to as the Cunningham property, then the Pampered Pet and the bank, the marketplace, at Town Hall, 10 West, the bank, the liquor store, the Theo's restaurant, then the little retail place there where the dry cleaners and all that used to be, then the pizzeria, and then it kind of stops until we get to the sports complex, and then you have sports complex, Dunkin' Donuts, the garage, the Conti building, and that basically is it. Where we have Pleasant View Nursery or you have House Vegetable, those are agricultural in nature. So yes, they do conduct business, but they're not as, let's just say, I'll use the word offensive, or they're not as visible in terms of being a business.
Okay.
Everything that they do is related to agriculture, whether they're selling vegetables or trees or whatever. So it's not as, the hours of operation aren't necessarily more related to business, which would operate 8, 9 o'clock at night. You know, they close at 6 o'clock, 6:30, somewhere in there. So that's where we are. Those are pre-existing non-conforming, and those will stay there. But we're allowing, if we increase the strip to the Worcester line, those would then, there you go.
Sorry, it took me a minute.
That's all right, but that would be it. So you see the green circle right in the center of that's the current residential A. And then everything green going south to Worcester is what we're proposing would be involved in this business or residential/business.
So otherwise, business now, right now is just the red spots.
Correct.
Right? So you
yes.
got like spotty here, right here.
Right. I tried to, again, describe them to you so you all understand where they are in town.
So the green circle is GRA,
GRA
and that same green stripe along 122 is also
GRA.
GRA. Yeah.
Correct, okay? So anyway, that's where we're at. And again, I said this last time we had the informational session. To the residents of Paxton that are watching this from home or are going to review it, it's your town. They're going to be your rules. We're not going to make them. We're working to come up with suggestions, but we're hoping that enough people will review this and feel comfortable with it. So when we have the special town meeting, and it gets approved, then the next step is it then goes to the Attorney General for review and then comes back and whatever before it's started or put into effect. So that's the first section, Heather. Continue, please.
Do we have more things we need to?
Oh, yeah, there's.
So, yeah,
About
so
on this?
just on that first section, the questions were, let me pull it up here.
I don't think Carol. Got
Should we change the current zoning maps at all? Should we make the changes from town center to Worcester line as proposed? Should we expand further the entire run of 122? And should we amend the zoning in the town center so there is no more lots with split zoning?
Yeah. I don't think Carol got a chance to voice her opinion.
I don't think I've got an opinion, but I've got a question. So you said, where we've got the agricultural businesses now, they will become business zoned, correct?
Correct.
So they, even though they're agricultural now, they will be able to do business.
They could, yes.
Okay, that's what-
Yes.
yeah.
So when you look at the two parcels, I mean, the Howe vegetable stand, I believe, is somewhere between 12 and 15 acres. It just has frontage on the road, but the lots go deeper. So if somebody wanted to change that, either the current owner, they could put some sort of other retail business on that site. The same thing with the Pleasant View Nursery.
Yeah.
But again, we have issues with Concom, with wetlands, and there's all kinds of other issues. It doesn't just say that acreage becomes business. There's a lot of hoops to jump through to change things.
I understand that. I just,
Okay? Yep. No, that's a very good question.
Yeah. Okay. Should we make motions on these or?
I don't know if no motions are necessary. I think more just, which way as a board, the support's going. So that, we have planning board members here this evening. So, it's good for them to hear that information as well, so that when they're having the materials before them. It's also important for Cheryl, myself, Neil, and Jeremy to take it back to the steering committee to bring that information back. So, if we're going the right direction, if, the select board representing the constituents thinks we're insane and we're going the wrong way,
Yep.
then we want to pedal back and make a direction
Right.
change.
Along that line, are you going to be the conduit for comments if they come in from the public going through your office? Or are they going to come to a future planning board meeting, or how do we?
Don't you do public hearings for this?
Right.
Yeah, so we're gonna do, eventually we'll need to set up public hearings for the for the planning board. And then we can also, we can create a page, we can even create an email for people to filter things through, just specifically for that, we just create a group for it.
That's fine. I'm just saying
So-
that in terms of tonight, somebody watching this saying, well, what does this mean? Is they have
They
a
can-
question?
They can email me directly
Thank
for
you.
now, I will collect all the questions, compile them, and we'll work on responses.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Right answer.
So you've heard from us about, I could go either way on expanding to Rutland. I'm not opposed to it, and I agree, I think that makes sense in terms of maybe offering an additional opportunity
Or
for folks.
baby steps? Maybe?
Well, but baby steps take 7 years or 9 years before
Well, no,
they go-
it could be a
the
change that
bylaws
could
are
come back
revisited.
later. I mean, I just think some of this is going to be very radical change. The next item we're going to talk to, you're really going to love this one. So Heather, just hang in there till.
Are you all set with the first item?
So we haven't made any decisions.
No.
So do you want to?
Well, she doesn't need a motion, but I think we probably need to at least
Say something.
give an opinion,
Yeah.
right,
I
as a
think we're in
board.
So we're in agreement that there does need to be some expansion.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think so. I think expansion down to the Worcester line is certainly appropriate. And then I would entertain expansion to Rutland as well, but understanding that there are different types of properties headed that direction than what you see necessarily down.
Which I think you're going to run into inevitably, no matter which way you go.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
And then, are you guys comfortable with reducing the split
Yeah.
zoning?
So I
Yes.
just want to clarify on GRA versus GRB. GRB is the less restrictive.
Larger lot, that's really all it is.
They're larger lot sizes. So I just want to make sure that if we take a lot that is currently 90% GRA and now make it all GRB, that's not going to
Penalize.
penalize them in any way.
No, because if you look at it, let's just say you have a lot that's 30,000 square feet, and it's a split lot. So the GRA part of it would be 20,000 to maintain residential, and to go to GRB, that would only be 30,000 square feet total, and we would require 60. So at that point, it would be a GR, how would we, GRA with exception or GRB?
That's a Jane question.
We'll
I don't know
have
if
to
she
pull
cut
up
it
the
off.
map. I did send you the map, I
Right,
don't know,
we-
just a minute ago.
Anyway,
I figured questions would-
there are very few lots that this will adversely affect, okay? And just to follow up on the baby steps or whatever, if you go west of Center and you head toward Rutland, you have some very, very large tracts of land that could be, if we include those in the business offering, you may have citizens that'll get very upset because the tracts are large enough that you could put in,
A gas station?
no, you could put in a major shopping center. And I'm not saying I'm opposed to that, but I think we really, really need to have reins on where this is going to go. That's why I said baby steps. So we decided as a committee when we were looking at all the options, if we went from the center down toward the Worcester line, if changes were to take place, they would be gradual, versus if you go west toward Rutland, there could be a change that could be very drastic very quickly. So we kind of discussed this, kicked it around and whatever, and thought that this might be, I mean, this is going to be a radical change from where we've been for the last, 200 and some odd years. So just keep those in mind as you're thinking ahead.
So the committee was thinking, stay with the Cunningham building as it is now? Stay there or further out?
I'm sorry, stay with,
Oh, the Worcester line.
No, not other way, Cunningham's
Oh,
towards Rutland. So you're thinking you'd stay there, not go any further than the Cunningham building?
The Cunningham Building.
yeah, that would,
there.
yes, that would stop, it would stop
Not
right
there like
there.
it is
That-
now.
Yeah, that's where it is now.
Just wanted to- yeah.
So I think this, Jane, do you want to just explain the map?
Yeah, there's the map.
Yeah.
Sure, that central area around the monument is where we had the 1,500, or have the 1,500-foot radius, and as we mentioned before, some of those lots were split between GRA and GRB. And so we've kind of cleaned those up. There are a few of them that might have frontage on 122, but they open up and back more like ag land. We left those as the GRB, and then added more commercial right in the center of town, and then extended down 122. The school site, we did not change. Actually, there's one little parcel that's surrounded by the school site, that needs to be read, so this must not be the most recent version.
I believe that's the Conti building, right? Not the office building, it's the greenhouse.
The
Bet-
apartment.
Between the pizzeria and,
Duncan's.
well, it's surrounded by the school where the fields are.
Yep.
That one, that's that little spot that she's got her cursor on right
Got
there.
it, yep. Okay.
And then there are a few other parcels that, might have a little bit of frontage on 122, but they open up and back to either ag land or have wetlands. And the group decided that those should be kept as the GRB.
B. A, I'm sorry, A, yeah.
A, okay.
Correct, A.
So our GIS guy zoomed in on this so you could see the parcel layers. And so it's on 5 different screens, if you can scroll down. Heather? Some of the land that was not recommended for change was land owned by the city of Worcester, I believe, for their water.
And again, I want you to keep in mind, as you look at some of those larger red parcels, there are other issues going on at this point in terms of environmental conservation and things like that. So yes, there's a house on it, but it's not all usable. Let's just leave it at that.
So that brings us back to the question, is the select board comfortable with doing away with the split zoning and just sticking to one or the other?
I think you already said that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we're fine with that. Just, trying to clarify the difference between GRA and GRB and make sure that nobody's going to be impacted, in an untoward way. But as long as that's the case, then
I'll review the parcels and verify that.
okay.
Thank you.
and to one note, if I can, to what you said about large parcels of land becoming available for big developments. We're not situated in a population center great enough for a Walmart or a Home Depot or.
You never know.
That.
You will never know until all of a sudden the plans
True.
come.
True.
But if you have Kirk, if you have a parcel of 20 acres or 25 acres, it would lend itself to a large retail with enough parking for that retail. And we don't have to worry about sewers, because septic will work at that point if the parcel is large enough. So that's all
I just don't want to put the fear of change in
Yeah.
the face of the public before there's a reason to be fearful of the change.
that's why we're having.
Trying to be
Right,
realistic.
that's why we're having this information, just to keep you up to speed as to what we've been discussing. No decisions have been made by the steering committee, correct? I mean, we're not there yet.
Nope, and once we put things, we'll get to the point, I think we have 1 or 2 more meetings before we finalize our materials, then, because our grant gives us funds until June 30th, we'll want to get to legal first, and then we'll go to planning board, then any changes we can cover with legal after that point. But we want to make sure, again, we're going the right direction, we have support of the select board and obviously the planning board as well, to make sure we're not
Right, do you guys have?
going the wrong way.
This is all just being unveiled to you right now. We're gonna take the ball at some point in the next month and we're gonna have a deep review. Once you see the final draft, we're gonna review it, we're gonna read it, we're gonna make sure you can redline whatever you want in it. But this has been a major step forward for the town.
And it's a major step forward because 4 years ago, I said, when we talked about economic development, that it had to start at the zoning and planning level.
Correct.
If we were going to make any progress, that's where it had to start.
Correct.
So, I mean, that in and of itself should show you that the support from the board is here.
Okay.
Can I quickly just ask our EDC liaison to what his thoughts are?
Yeah, again, this is, knowing what you're zoned for and what you can do and what you can't is gotta be the first step. When I started sitting in on these meetings, I do nothing more than listen, but it became apparent that what we've got now is so fragmented and kinda, how do you wanna attract business saying, yeah, you can have a 5,000-foot parcel here, but then it's not this, but you can have this and this. I think that cleaning this up and establishing a clear definitive map that says, hey, Paxton now wants business from here to here, all open, all available, if that's what we so choose. I think once that's done, then you can start formulating a plan, okay, how do we, if you build it, they will come, well, we built it, now they can get them in here. I mean, there's a lot, we've taken surveys, we've talked to the businesses that just hang the shingle on their side. I'm kind of in agreement with Kirk that, if you really want to move the needle and you want a paradigm shift of developing businesses in this town, you need something bigger than a hair salon or a coffee shop. You need to put some businesses square footage, and you need to get people here, you need to get things that are generating revenue and tax base.
And there's wording that can be put into the language of the planning and zoning bylaws that say keeping within the character of the town.
Sure, yeah.
Things that.
I do that all with site plan. I mean, they're all.
Understood.
Yeah,
But-
no,
I'm just getting that out there for the public to understand that we're not,
okay.
you know.
And I think that once, again, this is so good to define what you can have and what you can't, and it's well laid out, the maps help. It's a huge step.
Yeah.
Before you get anything, you need to have this.
I agree. Okay. So Jeremy, you're in favor of going to the Rutland line then? That's what it sounds like.
I'm in favor of economic development in general. Anything, again, there's gotta be caveats, there's gotta be in keeping with the character of the town.
Yeah.
I certainly don't want another rent them outlets, but at the same time, would I be adverse to a market basket? No. And I think that, again, it's what the people want to, so.
Right. Agreed. Okay.
I think that laying out a map that easily lets you know what you can and can't do is the first step, and then take it from there,
Yep.
Cast the line out there and see who bites.
And finding that balance between, business, which helps offset the cost of the school,
Yeah.
and in our finances, that's huge. We have to find a way, because otherwise it's gonna be hard to live in this town for a
Yeah,
lot
and
of people.
do you want to do, 100 small businesses or 4 big businesses? You gotta see what comes.
Yeah.
Again, it's not like you have 100 businesses on deck waiting to see what you're gonna give them.
No, we already have
You gotta
limited
make this
options.
as attractive as possible.
We have very limited options, so
Right.
we need to make those options as
Yeah.
available as possible.
And
In my
those
opinion.
maps, they look good. As somebody who wants to build or develop something sees that and says, hey, this was all zoned for business, let's go. So, it's a good step.
Okay. All right.
Next.
Do you have everything that you think you
I
need on that?
think we do on that
All
one.
right.
Okay.
Next one.
Item 2.
Common driveways. So common driveways are shared driveways between landowners. This is important. When we did the Fuss and O'Neill study for stormwater, they actually recommended doing this as a way to decrease the impervious surfaces by having shared driveways. Currently, we don't allow common driveways. So the question, let's see, the proposed change is to allow common driveways. The recommendation from the working group is to allow them in order to comply with the EPA's MS4 permit recommendations, requirements, and minimize impervious area. 2 questions therefore go to the select board. One is, should the town allow common driveways? And the second one is, if the town wants to allow common driveways, Should it be 2 residential homes, or up to 3, or some other number? Although the group is not fond of a number above 3, not necessarily, Neil does not like a number above 2. And I think that's a shared position amongst a few people.
All right, but I want to just
Yep.
defend the statement.
Yep.
The reason I am opposed to more than 2 is it allows a developer to go in and not have to put a road in. And then it becomes the responsibility of those lot owners to maintain that.
Like
So,
off of Grove Street,
pardon me?
like off of Grove Street that backs up to the reservoir.
Where is there is the,
You're thinking of Camp Pike?
Is it, I'm not sure.
no, but that's been there for a century.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking somebody that wants to, I'm in favor of the 2, because again, it stops the impervious surfaces and this and that. But if you put in 3, 4, or 5, it allows a developer to put in, what we'll say, a small subdivision of 3 or 4 homes with a common driveway that is the responsibility then of those homeowners. And it's
That's
just,
a valid point.
it's just something that, right now, I don't think we have enough, again, baby steps. Let's start with 2, we've never had it, so let's let 2 share, And my thought was 1 curb cut that branches off to 2 driveways, instead of a long driveway going in with frontage on the driveway that allows 3 houses or 5 houses, 2 on each side and 1 at the end of the, whatever, we'll call it a cul-de-sac. It takes all that requirement out of the planning board's purview to review, in terms of width, in terms of how to build it, if you run utilities, are they above ground, are they underground? All that stuff disappears. We lose total control of that. So 2, I'm okay with.
Do you anticipate that that could ever move to a place where, so like we have along, is it Richards Ave? Where there are some larger properties that have just a little bit of frontage, so they need a special permit, right, in order to build. I think we had one just
Real lots.
recently get built, right? And the way to get beyond that would be to have a shared driveway so that they have access to the road to access the back lot, and would allow splitting of those sort of long lots, right?
Correct.
So as of right now, there's still a frontage requirement that they would need a special permit for.
Well, you can have what we call a rear lot, or a hammerhead lot, or a flag lot, or whatever, that would have an extended driveway in to get to a buildable area.
Yeah.
So if you had a very large area, let's just say 10 or 12 acres that had minimal frontage, you could end up, in my proposal, with 2 homes.
Yeah.
If we go the other way, you could end up with 5 homes.
Right, right.
So we just want to make sure that we're able to control that a little bit, that it comes before the review process of the board to make sure that the development of that land is handled in the best interests of everybody, from the residents that would live in those homes to the town. That's all. So we just want to have
There's
tighter.
also- There are some lots that are non-buildable because of this restriction, because they do not have the frontage.
Well, we're talking about 2 different things here.
No, I understand, but then if they could get permission from the person who has the driveway on the edge of their property, then that would open up some possible development.
Possibly to another lot, not 4 or 5. So that's what I'm saying. So that helps some landowner.
Right direction.
Yeah.
Yes, we're going in the right direction. But again, I don't want to just make a radical change where we say, okay, boom, this is what's going to happen.
On this one, I'll buy your baby steps.
Okay, thank you.
The concern that I would have if we started making it like a mini cul-de-sac, for lack of a better term, right? Is that my experience with similar type layouts is that it becomes a problem later on when those houses then change hands and there's no common understanding of the requirement that they maintain the road and they have some expectations of the town.
It's the driveway.
The driveway.
It's the driveway. We cannot, right, it is a driveway.
Yeah.
Because again, I'll relate a personal experience. My son moved to Rutland. He is on an extended driveway. It's 1,400 feet long, but there are 5 homes on that. So what the first thing they did after they all moved in, and it all took place in the last 18 months, is, under advice of council, they created a homeowners association.
Should happen.
Right,
Yep.
so that they're at least, it's not me against you and against you and against you, and 3 get along and 2 don't, say, well, we'll just do what we want. No. So it just requires, again, more documentation, more everything. So as I said, I'm in favor of 2 at this point, maybe 3, maybe. But it's going to be under the watchful eye of the town. And again, protecting everybody,
Yeah.
so.
So,
Baby
so the
step.
question before us really is 2 or 3, I think.
Oh, do you like the idea of common driveways?
If we're happy with
Yeah.
that.
Right, we haven't
I'm
got to the
okay with
point
the
of
idea
where we're at
common
yet.
driveway.
I'm happy with common driveways.
Okay,
I think it's
I-
environmentally friendly, which is always nice.
correct.
And it gives us the opportunity for maybe a little bit of development on top of it. Okay.
And if the neighbor wants to help shovel the driveway,
There
then.
you go.
More power to them.
Okay. Again, it's a big step from none to allowing it, and then we have to now have the controls on what those allowances are.
Yep, yep. And then any preference on 2 or 3?
Well, we're not there yet. We haven't finalized that.
Okay. He doesn't want us to decide 2 or 3.
I'll defer to the board.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
What do they say, stay in your lane?
Any other questions on that one? We're good?
No.
Okay, subdivision rules and regs. So remember, these are the rules and regs that guide the contractors with new subdivisions when they're proposed and built. In order to do these, we pulled in, I think, everybody, right? So we had Tara opining on this, Mike was involved in this from fire, Travis was heavily involved with this, to make sure that we also incorporated any MS4 pieces, and then the rest of the steering group was heavily involved. Proposed changes, there are a variety of things from stormwater requirements, including reductions in impervious surface areas, narrowing street widths, providing for on-site rainwater infiltration, preventing runoff from entering the roadway, allowing sidewalks on one side of the roadway, among others. Public Safety, Department of Public Works, and like were consulted on these changes. Emergency vehicle access, road maintenance, snow plowing, provision of town water, and electrical service. The recommendation of the group was to approve and adopt the updated pieces for ease of use and in compliance with EPA's MS4 permit requirements. Question before the SB is, are you supportive of the recommended revisions on a high level, right, because you don't have the minor level, for the subdivision rules and regs? I think there was more of a, are there any specific questions, because I can't see that the select board say, no, we're not in support of changes that comply and address our issues.
Yeah. I think this one to me is interesting because we never fully got a chance to
Look at it.
capture the benefit of the wider streets and making sure there's sidewalks on both sides of the streets, because we haven't had enough change since that was put in place, right? But now the tide is turning, as it often does, and now we're looking at, okay, now we want a narrower street, we want a sidewalk only on one side of the street because we're trying to reduce the impervious surfaces in view of the stormwater provisions. I absolutely believe that any contractor should be required to make sure that they're putting into place all of the stormwater requirements, and it should be at their cost, and not anything that the town should have to retrofit later.
Okay, to follow up on that, what we've done for the last decade or thereabouts, you can ask for a waiver. So if you have the zoning rules right now for subdivision call for sidewalks on both sides. So if you don't want to put them in, you could ask for a waiver. And some have been granted, just saying that we'll put left or right, who gets it, who doesn't get it, whatever. And we leave that to the developer, and he can tell the homeowners that have it, you got it because you're lucky. Or the ones that want it, no, they got it because it's on that. So we've done things like that. And I think this is a good change moving ahead. And then the narrower roads, as long as the DPW is in line with, can we get, vehicles through? The fire department was concerned because if we put a fire truck on the road, is there passage around it, or are we shutting the road down for good?
Right.
So we've taken a lot of input, and I think at this point, we picked the middle road, because there were 3 recommendations, the narrowest, a middle one, and then what we have. And I think we're leaning more toward middle of the road, is what I'm going to say. So that will help, right. And in terms of, yes, is that, am I?
She was laughing
I
at
was laughing at Julia's pun.
I'm trying not to, okay,
I'm glad somebody finds me.
right, okay, enough said. So that's where we're at. But again, we don't have a final draft to show you yet. We just want you to know where we're going.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Move the question.
So I think everyone's good with what very little you know on that.
Yeah.
That we're providing, okay. MBTA zoning bylaws. So as I started out with this presentation tonight, one of the reasons we got the earmark was also to look at the MBTA zoning bylaws. It's a requirement that came out a couple of years ago with the Mass General Law and pertains to the what do we say, MBTA, rural adjacent communities, which is us, essentially requiring us to comply, and we have until when, Jane?
December 2025.
To have something passed and on the books. Lots of legislation, lots of litigation out there right now where the towns and the state are going back and forth about whether or not they have to comply or not. One of the biggest strings that the state holds, or we'll say sticks, is that they wrote it so that if we do not comply and do not have something in place, that they can take our state funding away from us. So that means Chapter 90, that means money from unrestricted
Works.
governmental aid, you name it. We wouldn't be eligible to apply for it. The towns in litigation, I think, have ways around that and other funding sources. Or some of them do, or I don't know why. But anyway, so going back to this, so I think the important thing, and Jane can really elaborate on this, and we spent a lot of time on this in the steering committee, was understanding that having the bylaw doesn't mean that this has to happen. This may never happen, right? We might identify parcels, and those parcels might remain the way they are for the next 250 years. Identifying the location does not mean we have to go and do it. Does not mean the homeowner or whoever owns the land has to sell it to a developer and has to do this. It means they have the ability to do it if someone so chooses at some time in some future. And that's what we're putting out there with the MBTA zoning bylaws. That's our requirement we have to meet. We have to make it available for someone to do if they so were inclined to do it. Now, it's very limited parcels, and we didn't list the parcels today because we still wanted to notify the parcel owners first before we start saying which locations. We spent quite a bit of time. I feel like every time we thought we were all on the same page, we went back the next meeting and looked at them again for 4 subsequent meetings, and it still kept coming up. So imagine when we get into informational sessions and time before the planning board, that those pieces will keep coming up. I don't think there'll be a lot of debate about the specific requirements and specifics involved in the bylaws to what you can have and cannot have. I think it's more going to be which parcel do you identify? But I could be entirely wrong. That's just my guess on that. So we already talked about why it's important. We do not currently have one. The proposed change is this. The addition of the zoning bylaw would allow adding an overlay district, so it'd be making an overlay district to specific parcels, which would allow multifamily development by right at a density of 15 dwelling units per acre. As an adjacent small town, the number of units we're required to provide zoning for is 84 dwelling units. So again, this doesn't mean we have to say, come on in here, let's build your 84 dwelling units here. It says we have to have the capacity somewhere through some lots, to be able to theoretically have someone do it, and we have to make it as of right. This would require a minimum of 5.66 acres of all the lands developable. The area to be zoned would include somewhat more acreage because the proposed bylaw includes a requirement of at least 30% of the site to be open space. Other factors could affect it, potentially be developed, includes steep slopes, impervious rock, wetland, soil type that can affect Title V compliance. So the recommendation is to put a bylaw out there, make sure it's in compliance with MGL. Again, we'll come back to everyone with parcels, identify later once we have initial conversations with the parcel owners. Question for tonight is, with this broad concept, are there really any questions from the select board that either you have or you think someone at home would have, other than, again, this is available as an option that we'd have to open up, but not necessarily something that's ever going to happen?
Yeah.
I think we're all aware of that because that's been mentioned from the word go. It's just to identify these
For a
properties.
long time.
Yeah, last couple of years, so.
Yeah.
Just to bring you up to speed too, one of our neighboring towns is in litigation with the state. Okay, you're aware of that?
Yeah.
Okay. For all of you at home, it's Holden.
Dave, did you have any questions on this?
Just the density sounds like you might need sewers to support it. Neil said.
No, because we would make sure, we don't have sewers in town, so we'd have to make sure that the site would support enough on-site treatment for the whatever unit numbers that we come up with.
But if you're gonna, would you have 20 units per acre?
15.
15.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like it gets pretty tight without sewers, without
Well,
find a
but-
second.
I mean-
That's one of the things about Paxton.
Correct.
So-
And
You look at
remember now,
Highland
the big
Village.
word that Heather used, this is a compliance.
Yes.
We are trying to comply with what the state wants.
Do we say that we can do it?
Right, it doesn't mean it's ever going to happen, but we have to have
Yeah,
some
we're
sort
aware
of
of that.
district.
Interesting that it requires 30% open space
Mm-hmm.
on the lot.
Yeah.
That's something that the committee wanted,
Oh, that was from,
to create a buffer between the development and other
I like that.
properties.
Yeah, no, that's, I think that's good. Yeah. Yeah. And it also may help with, a septic if you need it, but,
And we need to have reserve space. So
Yeah.
if something ever happens, you have this high-density housing that if something were to fail, we have to have a place to go to fix it.
well, right.
So-
And, not to tout the fire department perspective, but you also need to have space to put a truck.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that we went through.
Yeah.
So we're all good on MBTA?
Yeah.
Open space, I'm sorry, Carol?
Yeah, absolutely,
Okay.
yeah.
Open space residential development bylaw. So currently, the only open space development bylaw that exists is limited to developments for seniors. What is it? The town drafted one of these in 2020. It was not brought forward for adoption. The bylaw is very similar to the senior residential development bylaw in that it allows for clustering of homes while preserving more of a site as open space, yet it does not have an age requirement. It's important because these subdivisions are a more sustainable form of development as they reduce the amount of impervious area and it preserves more open space. The committee's recommendation is to approve and adopt an OSRD zoning bylaw to allow for clustering of residences while preserving more open space, reducing impervious area, and allowing for more rainwater infiltration. And essentially, the question becomes, is the select board interested in moving that direction?
If I can make one correction, that draft bylaw was 2000, not 2020. I
I was reading your word.
I apologize for the typo.
I saw Rich Fenton's name on that, and that wasn't in 2020. Okay, so, all right. No, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I was thinking, I missed that.
Like, I looked at that. It was very well done. Okay, I wonder can anybody give me an example of what this might look like? Like, is there an area near here that would fit this bill?
The new Highland Village, I'm sorry, the senior one over by Anna
The
Maria.
hills, yeah.
the hills, thank you, the Paxton
Okay,
Hills.
except we wouldn't necessarily make it age limited. That's
No,
what
it's,
we're-
they have no age limit on it, but
Yeah.
that would be one that comes to mind.
Okay,
And that's, I believe, 3 stories, we were talking about 2.5 stories.
Yeah.
Max. So we
Okay.
don't have to worry about new additional fire apparatus that need to be able to
yeah,
be deployed in case of a fire,
got it.
so.
Any thoughts?
And that was also a recommendation in the Fuss and O'Neill study to meet the requirements for the MS4 permit.
Correct.
No, I think we need that, personally.
Yeah, I don't see anything.
We've got a senior residential development in town, so it'd be nice to have a bylaw.
I actually would like to support more senior housing
Yeah.
in town. I know that this isn't particularly age limited, but just a general comment. Okay. I have no further
I don't
questions on
have
that.
any questions, I don't have any negative.
No?
I'm just surprised we haven't had one before. I'm surprised it hasn't come back up. the
Oh, I
open
know.
space vision.
Yeah.
Because like you said, people have been working on the open space
Right.
bylaw,
sure.
the open space, what's the name for it, when they have to do it every so many years.
Yeah, open space recreation,
I know once.
there's plans in
Yeah,
there
it's
too.
OSP something, yeah.
Recreation plan?
That's
Yeah.
different from OSRD, though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
but
No, but
you're
I'm
just
saying-
talking about the open space plan compared to like the master plan.
Yes.
Yes.
So we had people working on that. I'm surprised this didn't come up at that time.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, we're all set, the 5 issues there, and now, unless there's any more questions, I think it's interview time.
Good, yeah.
Neil's very excited.
Just how my whole day has gone today. I've been on the clock, off the clock, and, okay.
All right. Mr. Burgess, come on up.
Here. You want here?
That works.
Are you going to go podium?
Like that.
There you go.
There you go.
As long as you promise to keep coming back.
So introduction, I assume.
Sure.
Jason Burgess. I live on South Street. Lifelong resident. Built my house there in South Street about 10 years ago, where I did have to go in front of the planning board for some approvals. Been interested in the planning board ever since. I am also a business owner in town. I am a home builder in town, although we do custom homes. We don't do developments and things. And I also volunteer already on the Economic Development Committee with Jeremy, on the DPW Building Committee with Dave, and also coach T-ball here in town with Bruno.
Yay.
And that's what I got.
Okay, great. So I really appreciate you coming back. I know you had put in for this position once before, and the fact that you're back in front of us again tells me that you're dedicated to the position, so thank you for that. Does anybody have any questions for Jason?
Jason, I think we talked about it last time, but in terms of building projects in town, do you see that as an obstacle in terms of, if you had to bring a project before the planning board, you couldn't sit on the board in terms of that? And I just didn't know if that's a concern that you might have, or is more of your work outside of town?
Both. I mean, most of my work is outside of town. Most of my work, I personally or my company is not going for the planning board approval. We typically get hired after that stage when we're building on land that homeowners already own, and they're already getting those approvals and then hiring us just for the architectural side of it. So.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I serve on the DPW Building Committee with Jason. Jason's been a very positive member on that committee and contributing in a number of areas, so I think be a great member of this board.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions for Jason?
No other questions.
I don't want you to feel like you're not getting enough questions, but we've seen you and heard from you
Not so
before,
long
and
ago.
yeah. So I really appreciate you coming back and coming forward again for this.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. And Bruno, come on up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, just before you start, Bruno, what is the term of this appointment? Is it one remaining year?
Till the election, right?
So find the term for you, but it only goes until the next election.
Right.
All right, so you would fill the position from whatever tonight on till next May, and this candidate would have to then run for reelection for the 5-year seat?
Correct.
But is it 5-year seat then? No. when
It is.
I'm going to find right now when Jeff Kent's term
That's what,
expires.
that was the question was from Neil, I think.
Yeah, right,
Yes.
but it's a 5-year
Not
seat.
necessarily. It depends when it's the term of the person that's just left. So when was his term up?
I think he ends this year.
And so it would be.
He- Well,
5 years after that.
next May, so another,
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. So, okay.
2025.
All right, so
Yeah.
the appointment is from now until next election.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then at that point, if the candidate chooses to run for that seat, it would be a 5-year term?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
That never changes. It goes with the.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No worries. So, I'm Bruno Frangillo. I've been here since 2016. My wife and I built a house on Pleasant Street. Her family's been here for 5 generations.
Wow.
So while I'm relatively new, it's going to be very hard to get any of us to leave anytime soon. Experience-wise, I grew up on a farm in Oxford. It's a certified tree farm, and my family conducts demolition all over the state. F&D truck. One of the current projects they have right now is demolishing St. Cobain, or a big part of that campus. I seen the application online on the website. It's intriguing, and I've always wanted a way to volunteer in the town, but never really seen anything that caught my eye until the planning board came up. So giving it a shot. And I have a little bit of background in construction, mostly demolition, but I'm thinking that with the farm and the demolition and the recycling facility in Millbury, I have enough well-roundedness to help review or give any kind of pointers or whatever we need to do on the planning board.
Okay.
Any questions?
Go ahead.
Just to follow up, the the person that we're losing on the board because they're leaving town, and again, they can't keep that seat, unfortunately, has been a very detail-oriented member of the committee. I mean, pours into the subdivision rules and regs, the zoning regs and this and that. And is that something right now that you feel comfortable with? I know you have a builder's background, but in terms of the current rules and regs in place are at times somewhat ambiguous, and that's one of the reasons we're going through the rewrite to try to clean up a lot of this stuff here. But,
It's definitely something I have time for.
okay, so you'd have a,
Yep, I have a manager.
comfort level
position
with
within
it.
the company, and
Okay.
I can take time during the day to
okay.
get into this.
And no conflicts, you don't foresee any conflicts, anything in town?
We haven't performed any business in Paxton.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody
Any
else?
other questions?
I just
for
think
Bruno?
I think it's great. We have two applicants.
I do.
Like we
Absolutely.
did
Yeah.
last year, and it
Yeah.
just makes the town a stronger place.
It really does. Yeah, I totally agree, Dave. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? No? Hearing none? All right. You can sit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So this is a joint decision. And remind me, Neil, last time we just voted around the room, right? So is there a,
There's 6 of us.
Right, so, no, but last time there was I believe there were 4 on the planning board and then 3, so
Yeah,
that made
so we had an
7.
odd number, yeah.
Right, so tonight there are 6. So,
Yep.
I mean, we can start from the planning side, or you can start from the select side. It makes no
Yeah.
difference to me.
so do we want to start with a motion? Should we
Okay.
start with a motion?
For the select board or from the planning board standpoint? I mean, it's a joint meeting, but
joint-
you are the ultimate appointing agency.
Yeah. It's a joint meeting, but I would say, is there a member of the select board who wants to make a motion? How's that? And then we can all vote. Sound good?
I'd make a motion to appoint Jeff Burgess to the planning board.
Jason.
Jason, sorry.
It's all right.
I just should get my glasses out. I had time.
You can see the delay, but that's it.
For the next,
Till the next election.
till the next election. However, I would also like to encourage Bruno to stay in the wings, because it's always good to see people
Yeah, we'll
willing to engage.
certainly find a place for somebody, so. All right, so we have a motion to appoint Jason Burgess. Carol, how do you vote?
Just
Or, I'm
let's-
sorry, we need a second. Let's get a second.
I'll second that for
Yep.
conversation. I think both gentlemen would do probably an excellent job. They both probably can read plans and be able to read through the zoning, the planning board bylaws and the zoning bylaws and everything. But the fact that Jason came before us before, I'm inclined to go with Jason.
Yeah.
Okay, to follow up on that, I think Jason, just because that's what's on the table right now, with his previous request to join the board, I think that's one thing, but also he's on 2 other committees, and maybe the planning board would hopefully take precedent over that, and he may need to resign from one of the others, and then we could fit Bruno into that, because they're all interrelated here. Economic development, planning, and the DPW building, I mean, they're all just kind of hand in glove the way that they're fitting. So, and I'm not saying that Jason has to resign from one, but he may find that the work on one takes away from time on the other.
Yeah.
So at that point, we would, have somebody who may be interested in filling one of those vacancies,
Sure.
if that were to come up that way.
I would leave that up to
Yeah,
Jason.
we don't know what the workload
Yeah.
on
Correct,
those
as
two
I
other
say.
committees are.
Right,
So
right.
we know where the planning board goes.
Yeah. So I would vote in favor of supporting Jason on the planning
Okay.
board.
Members of the planning board?
I would recommend Jason
Okay.
to join the planning
All right,
board.
David?
Yeah, and it's great to have 2 qualified candidates, but Jason has shown a desire to be on this board for a while and has shown a competency on other boards. So I vote for Jason.
Okay. I would probably vote in the affirmative on that, too, but I want to make sure that Bruno understands that there are several ways to get involved and stay active in this,
Totally
in this town. And it's nice, as David said, to have 2 candidates come forward, because before, we've really never had that. And it just shows that maybe the citizenry in town is taking an interest in which way we're going. So at that point, this is not a vote for one and against the other
it's just a
in
point.
any way, shape, or form. It's just a vote to say, okay, let's keep the ball rolling in both courts. So at that point.
Never like to turn anybody away.
Right.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So, so Bruno, the vote didn't go in your favor, I guess, if you want to put it that way, or maybe it is in your favor, I don't know. But as far as openings are concerned, I'm sure there are other places where we could use volunteers.
Correct.
How do I find those
On the town website.
That's right.
every once in a while?
Yeah.
Yep,
Right.
or you take my card when you leave and I'll be in touch.
Yep.
She'll make you aware of every part of the
I think we said this to Jason last year.
Yes.
But it was, you're on the hook now, so we're not going to let you off too easily. Yep.
Make sure all
Yeah.
of us have your name and number before you leave.
Right.
So I think that's fine. I appreciate that effort. And whatever he's got to do to get sworn in so he can be at the next meeting, we would
Yep.
appreciate that.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so Jason, you'll need to make an appointment with Lori up
He's
at the
already done
town
it
hall.
twice, so.
And you know what to do. Get sworn at, and then you'll be on your way.
Get sworn at.
All right, so we need a motion then to adjourn the planning
We
board.
done,
Yes? or-
all in favor?
Yeah, all in,
Yeah,
yeah,
it was
unanimous.
unanimous. Okay,
Yeah.
so we need a motion to adjourn the planning board for tonight.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're good.
Okay.
All right,
awesome.
thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Good. We'll get the seats all warmed up.
So next on our agenda was the public hearing for the wine and malt club license for Seven Saws Brewing. We are going to pass over that tonight. Do you want to give any additional information?
Sure, yep, so they're doing three things with their license. One is transferring it from the old owners over to Seven Saws. One is changing the liquor type from the club license to the tavern license, and the third is the category from wine and malt to all alcohol. I overlooked the third checklist on the ABCC with the abutters list, so we did not comply with that piece. We talked to this state ABCC as well as the applicants, and in the discussion, we decided to wait, applicant decided to wait for the next select board meeting. So it will be advertised again on this Friday, and the abutters will be notified within 3 days of that. So we should be good to go for the 10th. So we're just asking to table it for a couple weeks to make sure we hit all of the check boxes.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So, now that we're beyond that, I see we've appropriately shifted our seats. So, we have the joint meeting with the Finance Committee. I have two members of the Finance Committee here. Do we have anybody on cable? No. So,
So it's not really a finance, but we don't have a quorum.
so there's no quorum for Finance, but at least you're here.
We're meeting tomorrow night, so we can share with everyone who's, gives their regrets this evening. Two are traveling, one's on vacation.
Okay.
But we'll have a meeting tomorrow night, and we'll convey the results of tonight's discussion tomorrow night.
Great, yeah, and certainly, obviously, the video will be available if they wish to watch as well. Okay, so I see Terenzio is here. So we have our FY '23 audit review. I don't think I've seen a management letter yet. Has there been a management letter out yet?
A manager letter was not issued this year.
Oh, okay, all right.
And,
That's why you didn't see it.
That would be why. So I'm not crazy, which is good, at least not when it comes to this.
Good evening, folks, honorable members of the Select Board, ladies and gentlemen, and old friends. My name is Terenzio Vopicelli. I'm a certified public accountant, and I represent the firm of Roselli, Clark and Associates, certified public accountants and consultants with offices in Woburn and Hopedale, Massachusetts. A required communications letter was provided to management dated December 27th, 2023. I'm not going to bore everybody with this, but I am going to touch on just a few topics in here. Management, which includes the folks at this table and over here, are responsible for the selection and the employing of appropriate accounting policies and practices. Accounting estimates and their related disclosures are integral parts to the financial statements. The most sensitive accounting estimates pertain to the total OPEB liability, which is determined using an alternative measurement approach that's available to communities of the size of Paxton, and that differs from an actuarially determined calculation. The total pension liability, which is based on the town's proportionate share of the Worcester Regional Retirement System, and then your allowances for doubtful accounts. We did not encounter any significant difficulties in dealing with management or any disagreements on any accounting, reporting, or other auditing matters. And again, the full context of that letter, if you all don't have it, is here. The town's 2023 audited financial statements were issued on December 5th of 2023 with a modification to the audited opinion. We've communicated this in the past. Every 2 years, the electric company, or electric department, which is audited by a different auditor, receives a qualified audit opinion based on the timing of the Worcester Regional Retirement System's financial statements and its impact. It really doesn't have much of an impact to the town, other than it adds an extra 2 or 3 paragraphs to the audit opinion.
Okay.
Doesn't impact really anything. I'm happy to say there were no internal control matters or deficiencies in internal controls that we observed during the financial statement audit that required formal communication to this board. Once again, we did not issue a management letter. Last year, we issued an extensive management letter, and we just felt that at this point in time wasn't necessary to have a second one. Had we issued one, it would have had a number of informational items in it, one of which would be it's entirely possible that the community is going to be subject to a single audit in fiscal '24 and/or fiscal '25. It really all depends on the timing of the town's expenditures of its ARPA funds. So if the town expends more than $750,000 in federal monies, again, the vast majority of it probably being ARPA, but there can be some assistance to firefighter grants and some other federal grants. It would require a single audit. And then, boy, the interest rates have really skyrocketed. I understand from the treasurer that some monies have been moved subsequent to the end of June, and I would just continue to encourage that the town looks for avenues to increase its investment income, because that just drops right down to the bottom line. Our opinion reflects, again, a modified opinion on the Paxton Municipal Light Department, and it all has to do with how they measure their pension liability. We were engaged to perform a financial statement audit. In summary, the objective of a financial statement audit is to opine on the fairness of the financial statements and their related disclosures. This was not a forensic audit, which is a separate assurance engagement in which the objectives might include the discovery of fraud, waste, or abuse. As discussed last year, we continue to observe an increase in municipal theft. Management, which includes, again, the folks in this room, are really in the best position to address those risks, given their oversight of the day-to-day operations. My firm is in your offices for 4 days, 5 days. You folks have the ability to see red flags that we won't be able to see simply because we're here for such a limited time and we're pretty much heads down that whole time. The audited financial statements consist of several key parts. The government-wide financial statements, which are on a full accrual basis, the fund financial statements, which are on a modified accrual basis, and those most closely resemble your UMIS financials, your statutory financials that you actually run your business off of. There's proprietary financial statements that have your water and your electrical operations. Those are also on full accrual. There's the notes to the financial statements, and then we have what's referred to as required supplementary information, primarily on OPEB, pension, budget actual, and the management discussion analysis, which precedes the financial statements, is also considered required supplementary information. In terms of budgetary flexibility, A common measure used by rating agencies, including S&P, is to evaluate a community's assigned and unassigned fund balances as a ratio of its normal expenses and its normal transfers out. And that's generally just done at the general fund level. That is referred to as a reserve ratio. The town's reserve ratio is roughly 12% this year versus 14% in the prior year. A reserve ratio in excess of 10% is generally considered quote-unquote good by the rating agencies. They have quite a complex nomenclature. Good, very good, strong. The town entered fiscal '24 with a number of reserves. It had about $539,000 in free cash, down slightly from the prior year, and its general and capitalization funds totaled $521,000, down from $561,000 the previous year. In terms of budget to actual performance, which you can find on page 62 of the financial statements, on a statutory basis, the town's general the 2023 revenues and other financing sources were about $36,000 less than its expenditures, so essentially break even. The town carried over $187,000 in the form of articles and encumbrances into fiscal '24. Actual statutory-based revenues exceeded budget by nearly $229,000, and expenditures and carried over articles and encumbrances were more than $330,000 lower than budget. Continuing on with the governmental funds, the town reports its ARPA and its ambulance fund as major governmental funds. The ARPA fund we talked about in 2022, it triggered being a major fund given its unearned revenue, the value of the unearned revenue. In 2023, the ambulance fund tripped those calculations just ever so slightly. And so we started reporting that as a major fund. The ARPA fund expended approximately $300,000 in fiscal '23, primarily for public work costs, and had a remaining balance of $839,000, which the audited financial statements report as unearned revenues. As we talked about last year, those funds must be formally obligated by December 31st of this year, 2024. An obligation under the terms of this federal award, and it could vary federal award to federal award, but under this federal award would mean that those funds have been expended, or they've been formally obligated through either contract, binding contract, or a binding purchase order. So a plan by this board, by a subcommittee, by the finance committee, by whatever it is, that does not constitute obligation. It has to be formal for this plan.
I believe there's a
Under this.
contract in place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If it's a contract and you all have identified
Yeah.
that this is the funding source. The ambulance fund, again, which qualified as a major fund, reported revenues of about $494,000, and they made a budgeted transfer of $310,000 into the general fund, which is, again, normal in the ordinary course of your operations. The cash balance in the ambulance fund was about $690,000, and they had a net receivable of $213,000. It was a $625,000 gross with a $400,000 allowance. The non-major funds, which is the aggregation of all the rest of your funds, your capital projects, your receipts reserved for appropriation, your special revenue funds, they reported an increase of $89,000 in fiscal year 2023. The audited financial statements also include a number of debt schedules that detail your 24 to 28 expected principal and interest payments, and then each 5-year increment thereafter. And you can find those on page 42 and 43 of these financial statements. In addition to the long-term debt, the town, just like every other municipality in the state of Massachusetts, faces significant future obligations in terms of long-term personnel costs related to pensions and OPEB. We briefly talked about the pensions. The town is a member of the Worcester Regional Retirement System, and as a result has little to no impact or effect on its pension plan, save the adoption of a pension reserve fund, which you could actually, essentially is a pension stabilization fund. That's something you all could opt to do. The town's proportionate share of the Worcester Regional Retirement System's net pension liability was a little more than 1.2% for the past 4 years. Based on its most recent actuarial studies, the Worcester Regional Retirement System was about 48% funded at December 31st of 2022. That was down from 56% the year before. Now, that is measured on a calendar year basis, and '22 was a negative year in the S&P as well as the bond indexes. Nobody reported gains, and we audit 16 public pension systems. We would expect that increase, that funding ratio would increase this upcoming year, and I'm sure they're under audit as we speak, because 2023 had a pretty significant investment return. And based on the composition of their assets, we would expect that to be anywhere between 10.5% and 12% return. They use a discount rate of 7.25%, so that's a significant increase. Therefore, we would expect that the funding ratio would come up. Through June 30th of 2023, the town did not have any monies put aside for its OPEB trust, which it's the alternative measurement approach had calculated to be about a $2.2 million total liability in the future. The electric department does maintain its own OPEB trust, which it has an an actuary doing its valuation, and the actuary estimated that was 120% funded in the prior year.
Wow.
Exactly. So it was just quite, yeah, wow was the right word for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's that total? What was their liability?
I can find that out in a quick moment. We would have turned to page 49. Their total liability is $705,000, and they've accumulated $844,000 to address that
Good for them.
as of their last reporting period. Finally, we'd like to remind the town of some of the risks that it faces in respects to phishing and network security. These are areas that keep us up at night. We have spent time talking to the folks in Treasury, particularly about phishing, because it's the Treasury Department that controls the money. They're the ones releasing the money. They're the ones that get victimized the most by it. So we have talked to them about some of the red flags that are out there. And essentially, if anybody were to ask, I want to change the way I'm getting paid, there has to be some diligence and follow-up on that. Employees, it's a small town, can physically show up and sign paperwork. If a vendor, like myself, were to shoot an email, we need to follow up with that. Because that's how a lot of them get caught. And that concludes the formal aspect of my presentation. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
Questions for Trenton?
I don't have any. I'm sorry.
So I had a question in the financial statement, and I don't know that I can direct you to the right page, but this is a question that came from the community, and it was looking at public safety. There was a number associated with the public safety budget that was much higher than what's actually budgeted, and we wanted to find out what else is being included in that number.
Well, that depends on where you're looking at. If you're looking at the full accrual financial statements, you're going to take essentially what did the town spend on its statutory books, and then I'm going to add components like depreciation expense that's associated with public safety equipment. I'm going to add to it, and by the way, I'm going to subtract the capital expenditures that were made in the current year for that.
Yeah.
I'm going to add to it the effect of the pensions as they apply to the public safety. You folks don't have a school system. The largest component of allocation for of pension as well as OPEB expenses are going to be towards public safety. So things like that which show up in which you budget for in its own line item, your health insurance is budgeted in its own line item, those actually get allocated in the full accruals.
Okay.
So you don't, it makes sense when you see it on a piece of paper, here is the balances, and then here's where we add these components to it. I would ask that they look at the modified accrual financial statements, the governmental funds. That should more closely resemble your internal books.
Okay.
That's a perspective issue.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
This is the page, Terenzi, that they were looking at. So I think you just explained that with that number. It's page 10 on your books.
Page 10? Yeah, so that's going to be the full accrual. It's that early in
Yeah.
the financials.
Yeah.
It's there.
Yeah. And that's where folks are getting a little concerned about the massive increase of 3.7 mil to 4.9 mil.
And a significant portion of that was the effect of the Worcester Regional Retirement System non-cash pension expense, which flowed in there.
Yep.
So had they looked at, 5 or 6 pages later in the books, if that was page 10, if I go to page 16, that should more closely resemble what really happened
Okay.
as far as on a cash basis.
Right. Excellent. Okay. That's good. Thank you for that clarification. I asked you this question on it feels like an annual basis lately, but what are you seeing in terms of OPEB with other municipalities, and how much are people able to fund that liability, and what are we looking at now from a requirement perspective of when we expect that this is going to become?
There is no requirement to fund your OPEB. If I'm looking in my crystal ball, at some point in time after 2040, when the pensions are required statutorily to be fully funded, and I would suspect that Worcester Regional Retirement System might seek special legislation because it's just so poorly funded and there's 99 communities paying into that. It's entirely possible that they will seek special legislation, but again, that's a crystal ball. We might see a requirement to start funding OPEB. So right now, there is no funding requirement. You are my only community that doesn't have monies put aside that I audit.
Really? How many, out of how many?
34.
34.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but I don't know if anything happened in fiscal '24, because unfortunately, I'm always looking backwards.
Yeah. Do you know, and I'm asking you to give me numbers that you probably don't have at your fingertips. I recognize that, and I'm sorry.
Okay.
But on average, can you give me an understanding of what % of a community's liability has been funded on, from the?
I can't do this now, but I do have a table that the actuary that your electric department uses provided to me. He does roughly 35 to 40% of the state. So I would argue it's a pretty representative sample.
Okay.
And you can see what percentage, what percentile you're in if you are between 0% and 5% funded, so on and so forth. And I can forward that off to Heather.
Okay,
That would be good to see.
that would be helpful. Yeah,
But again, that comes from the actuary. It's unaudited, but it is some nice data.
okay. Now, from a bond rating perspective, I know we had some discussion between finance and the select board at our last joint meeting about the fact that we had taken some money out of stabilization last year. And so we were hoping to be able to put money back into stabilization this year. Can you give us some clarity around what the impact is of pulling out? I think it was $86,000 for us that we had pulled out of stabilization.
They're going to ask questions about that as to why you need to use that to balance your budget or whatnot, but that's a better question to ask your bond advisors.
Okay,
They're the experts in that area. I do sit on a lot of S&P calls, provide information for what happened during the year. I will help communities that want to try and increase their S&P rating, but that's a better question to ask your bond advisors. Which, do you folks use Unibank here or Hilltop?
Moody's.
Pardon?
Yes.
Unibank. So your Unibank representative would be in a better position to answer that question.
okay. And then around free cash, it's my understanding from the DLS website that that a community should be producing between 3 and 5% in free cash, based on, 3 and 5% of their total budget in free cash. So that would be our unassigned reserve that you would be looking at in terms of free cash, correct? As opposed to assigned reserve, which would be.
No, that's free cash is a Massachusetts statutory term. Unassigned is a GAAP term.
Okay,
There's some correlation to the two, but it's not an apples-to-apples comparison.
Okay.
I would warn you on that, as, it just simply isn't.
okay,
Your free cash, if that's the DOR's recommendations, DLS recommendations, that's great, but your free cash is a function of, what you're taking in for taxes and other receipts versus what you're spending. It's
Right,
just-
right.
Just falls out.
Okay. And so from an auditing perspective, are you looking at how much free cash is generated by the town as being a positive financial indicator or a negative financial indicator?
I'm looking to make sure that what you generate, what the DOR has certified,
Yeah,
that you didn't overspend that.
got it.
I would be concerned if you overspent it, because then your budgetary system is not functioning as designed.
Okay.
I believe you, on the June 2023 annual town meeting, you essentially appropriated virtually all of your prior year certified free cash to use for the '24 budget,
Correct.
which is not atypical for this community.
Right. Okay. Any other questions for Trenzio?
No,
I don't mean to.
no, good questions, though.
No,
No,
very
good questions.
Lindsay, can I ask one more question? So on that, I caught your word atypical for this community, but is it atypical for the communities you deal with in general?
No, I have a handful of communities that pretty much use it all up. It all, you know, you all operate on a razor-thin budget, you know that.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah. Okay.
there are other communities that are swimming in cash.
I know.
Yeah, though, they got big businesses.
I wish
in
we were
town.
one of
Well, they got
those.
big businesses in town,
Yeah.
multiple tax rates.
Right. Right. We,
It's a
we're
nice-
working on it.
Nice little
Yeah.
bedroom community here, and it
Yeah, yeah.
costs a lot.
Well, that's the thing. If you want to live in Paxton, you have to, I think, understand that that's what Paxton is, right? I mean, although we're trying to make strides to get additional business into town and hopefully generate some more tax base, you know, the reality is that that's not going to happen quickly.
Senior housing does a really good job, because you don't have the school component to it.
Yeah.
So I like to look at it, there's lots of gravy in that.
Yeah. Well, the other benefit to senior housing too is it gives people a place to go but stay in town.
Yeah.
When they can, you know,
Yeah.
get to a place where they can no longer maintain their home.
This is a marvelous community for senior living. It really is.
Yeah,
Aesthetically,
Yep.
right.
you're pretty close to Worcester, you're pretty close to the Route 2 corridor.
Right. Anything else for Trenzio? No?
Nothing from the finance committee?
Yeah, a couple things. Start off with a couple of thank yous. You held up your report, I'll hold up mine. For those that are watching, it's available on the town website, I think under Town Accountant, under Audited Financial Statements. It's a 63-page report, probably not on everybody's summer reading list, but if you have a question about the town's finances, it's very nicely presented. I know you're required to do it in certain regards with GAAP and government accounting, but it's a good report, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
The other is to thank you for continuing to be our auditor. You're been just recently reappointed. You were the incumbent. The town went out to bid, and only a few responded, and you were one of the two, which I thank you. Sometimes that's a invitation for the incumbent to look for the exit door, but you stayed, and we appreciate it. And by my standards, you did it at a hometown discount again. I think the
Look at
closest
those cookies.
to you, I understand Dee baked cookies for you for the prior audits, and thank her for having anything to do with reducing the fee.
Cookie
But,
discount.
I wouldn't want that to go unnoticed, because I think the second that responded was 50% higher than you, which is not an invitation for you to go up in your fee, but an indication of the commitment that you've made to the town of Paxton. So
We're in a
thank you very much.
We're in a very interesting industry that has gone through a lot of consolidation, and unfortunately, that has squeezed a lot of the smaller towns, and just didn't feel that it was necessary
Right.
to do market price.
The only other thing, which I'm not sure I want to go there, is, but I do want to go on the record, as I am a staunch opponent of OPEB funding. and I think in some of your own communication with the town, bond companies and auditors have gone on record is, it's nice to do, but you shouldn't do it at the expense of your operating budget and your capital budget, which is reasons why we haven't done it. In addition to which, it's not mandatorily required that we do it. It might be, as you just said, in 2040, and I look around the room and say that might be somebody else's problem at that point, but right now, we're not doing it because we need to direct those funds in other areas, so,
You all have some very difficult decisions to make.
right.
It's a razor-thin budget, so do what you need to do.
So the last thing is you're gonna need to do a single audit for opera. Is that,
Possibly.
possibly?
I haven't seen the numbers in 2024. If you've expended more than $750,000 in the year, who knows? You might avoid it.
we
All
might,
depend, it all depends on the timing, because you had 839 available? 839 available. I don't think you received any more.
No.
well, we have one item at 750, but is the actual cost 747, or is it 750? That would trigger the single audit.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
there'll be one audit at least.
We had planned for
Yeah,
an
plan
audit.
for at least
yeah.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, from our perspective, it is what it is. If you hit the 750, you took the money from the feds, you have to abide by their rules.
Right, for sure.
It
Yeah.
is what it is. So you'll probably get a single audit, you'll likely have a finding, and nothing will ever come of it, because you won't have another one after that.
Well, there's $5,000 earmarked in the
Yes.
opera schedule, so it'd
Okay.
be nice if we didn't have to do it.
I'd love not to do
5,000
it.
isn't a lot, but we're trying to balance a budget, so 5,000 is a lot.
Yeah, if we didn't have to do it, I'd be ecstatic.
Right. Good.
Well, thank you for your time, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you so much for coming out.
2 minutes during transition.
Appreciate that. Oh, you don't need to go. You need to go. Go on. Go on, man. Let's go bathroom.
We'll take a 3-minute recess.
We've still got a few things though.
Yeah,
Okay.
just a recess.
Yeah.
Just give Kirk a chance to stretch.
Not on his own.
When you sent it 5 p.m.?
So essentially, the chapter 4, section 4 is just the method of doing it, right? So you're just going to town meeting and you accept it. The master law that you saw pertains to doing an information packet. So if we wanted to do an information packet, we'd have to, and it was accepted at town meeting to do that moving forward. You have to do it anytime there's a ballot question that arises that's local, and you have to follow the provisions that's outlined, timelines and so forth.
That's why every year you get that book in an email for the state election. List the yes and no by the two fours and against people that are funding it.
Yes, but you could opt to do that.
still off camera. I understand, that's the for or against.
Yeah.
That's not what we were recommending. What we're trying to say is, what do you get for 950?
Yes, but Lori asked the question about whether or not we could do it both as like the state, that answers that question.
If you do it once, you gotta do it forever.
Yep.
Even an informative question.
Yes,
Ooh, that's expensive.
That's an important, yeah.
but I'm happy to address them when we're back on camera on item 1 if anyone wants to follow up on that, because I didn't write a memo on that, I'm sorry. I thought about it, and I was like, I don't got time.
I understood it from the way it was explained.
Okay.
They gave up after 4 reads.
This
Heather.
is Scott, by the way.
He said he needed a minute to stretch his legs. You have some hair that's like,
It's my
it's
day.
rebelling, yeah.
I'm telling you, it's the day. Then it doesn't help the angel catching me on the camera.
Yep.
What am I looking at? Oh, no.
Is he in there or is he not in
No,
there?
it's bathroom.
He did go stretch, okay.
Jeremy, don't yawn, don't yawn. Come on. It's sexy. Hey, hey, hey.
Heather, did you get what I sent to you?
I do, I have it available.
Can we remember to thank the Memorial Day Committee?
Yes.
I meant to write it down, but
That's important,
Yeah.
thank you.
okey doke.
Are we all ready? I don't know if you can hear me. Scott, we're ready when you are.
Okay.
All right, so just resuming the meeting of the Board of Selectmen. Today, Tuesday, May 28th, it is currently 7:51 PM. We're just returning from a brief recess. So next on our agenda is discussion of any potential budget concerns. And I believe that there are some questions about what information can and can't be provided to the town, and Heather wanted to give an update on that.
Sure. So at the joint meeting of FinCom and Select Board a few weeks ago, I think it was Lori who actually brought up a question and cited the fact that when the state has an election and local election ballot questions, they're able to mail out to every household those red books. They give you the information and pros and cons. And she was curious as if that was something that would be available to the town to do. So it's a complex answer, but the answer is yes. Under Chapter 53, Section 18B, the town can vote at town meeting to accept that statute, and as a result, be able to do such a generation of materials for local ballot questions. The problem is, we would have to do it for every single local ballot question that came out. You'd have to have you'd be expending funds for legal counsel based on the statute. You'd be expending funds for legal to also review with the proponent group in town and the opposition group in town to draft both sides, as well as a neutral summary of that piece of information. The other thing in this that's required is that you still mail it to each household that has registered voters added. I did the number, I don't have it in front of me, I think I sent down the select board info, I think it was like 1,611 homes, give or take.
Sounds right.
That we would have to, and that's just a rough estimate that I was playing with an Excel sheet in about 5 minutes. That we would be required to mail that. You figure everything all said and done, paper, everything else, you're looking at $1 per page, even if you did a cardstock double-sided with the mailing information on it. So, again, that is a possibility, something we could do, but it requires adoption at town meeting, and it also would become something we'd be required to do forevermore. So,
Okay,
just wanted to cover that basis to make sure no one was out there wondering about that option.
okay. All right. Any other potential budget concerns other than the obvious that we've discussed?
Well, just to speak to that point, that state red book that we're now referring to, it's the for or against, which I totally understand, and I actually.
Explanation and then the for and against.
Right, an explanation of it. But my point was not that, which, as you just explained in terms of lawyers and drafting and cost, I wouldn't be in favor of that. What I think there's need of is, what's the 950? That's where I was getting at. Is there something that the Select Board and the Finance Committee jointly could write, just explaining what it is and not advocating for or against? That's the question I have, and if that is answered by what you just said, that we can't do one, and therefore by default we can't do the other, then we have our answer. But as I've read the ballot question, it's boring, plain vanilla, and it's going to raise the same question as the $1,440,000 raised. When somebody first sees it, I think their reaction is not going to be positive.
So,
And
if
and
I
if
understand
there, if
right,
there was a way to explain that this is to subsidize the budget deficit and to set a little bit aside for certain stabilization funds.
so if I understand your question, can we provide a matrix without opinion of what that 950 is?
An explanation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of the for against, point that you've raised and cited Mass General Law, that we can't do it unless we have a local option, and now we got to do it for here and after, which I don't want to do one because we're putting up a no fishing sign someplace. That's not my point. My point is just getting some real basic, to-the-point information out there. I think we're going to be at a disadvantage if we don't get that out there.
So I think we can put info out there. I think the problem is, or the questions always come back as to who's putting it out there, right? Because we have folks in town, like town department heads, employees, who are very restricted as to what information we can say, what we can put out there. Select Board have a lot more leniency as elected officials. But you still have to be careful. Office, campaign, political, finance, they define a public employee essentially as even an appointed individual who receives a stipend, right? And then there's more restrictions that come with that. And then you have the conflict of interest law that balances that piece out. The problem is, and especially conversations, even legal counsel, we can we can have information for people and make it available, but we can't mass send it. So the question is, if we're mass sending out a piece of information, and I think we need to send something that says, here's what's coming up, you need to know this. I think the question becomes, what can be contained within that? So Mark's question is, if we were to do something like that, do like a mass email blast, first of all, can we do it? Are we within the parameters to do it and say, here's what's coming up? And can we say, okay, here's what that number looks like? Well, I think as long as it's neutral and it doesn't say, if you don't do this, these services will be cut. Right, and just says, here's what it looks like, here's what we're planning to do with the funds, I think likely it'd be okay, and if we were concerned at all, we can always send it to legal counsel to make sure we're good on that piece. But again, I think, and we talked about this a lot at the joint meeting of FinCom and Select Board, I think the most important thing for this override, if we do nothing else, is to make sure FinCom and Select Board are on the same page. I think that is that's the most important thing. If we do nothing else.
But how does that word get
Well,
out?
so let me just ask a question. All of us are appointed, elected, none of us receive a stipend. No one on the Select Board receives a stipend, no one on FinCom receives a stipend.
could you put something like that out with all of our names on it?
So the problem isn't so much just you guys drafting it, the problem is the distribution method, and if we're using any public resources to distribute or generate the materials, right? So that's one of the biggest things, that's the conflict of interest side, right? I can't use employee staff time to generate a vote for this. That being said, can we have general information? Probably. And we pretty much did that last round, right? We took time, put together FAQs. So if a department, there was a question on a department, talked to the department, they drafted the answer to that piece, right? So I think we can, I think we just have to be careful what we're doing and how we do it. And again, we have legal counsel. If we need to ask them a question, we ask them a question to make sure everyone's on board. But I think the two bodies, to your point, Jeremy, have a lot more leeway than a lot of other bodies in town. Because select board's elected, even if they got a stipend, they're still elected.
But a simple ledger on the website as to where this 950 is being appropriated
That's information.
to is, I mean, that we could just point people to.
Yeah.
Go there's the ledger, that's what we're,
Yeah, it would just be a valid question and an explanation.
without opinion.
I think we can do that. I think we should be able to do the breakdown. I mean, at very minimum, we can put it on the FAQ page, right? Because we already do that now. We can send out, I think we can easily send out a mass email again to let people know what's coming up. And here's the website to go to if there's any questions, or email us if there's questions. I think the harder question becomes, what do you do? Like, is there a way to send out another mass email to say, hey, this is coming up and here's all the information you need to know on both sides? And I don't know if we can do that.
Well, but if,
But I think we can do general.
Asking for
I don't
that.
think that. I think you
No.
just want an explanation. of-
Just
Yeah.
a simple one-page.
Yeah.
5 plus 5
What it is.
equals 10.
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, that's
Just
all
the
we're
ledger.
looking for.
Yeah. I can't imagine that being a problem.
Well, we almost did it anyway before, so
Yeah.
it's
I
different.
mean, if you were asking for an override, say that was just 850, you've already sent out the budget and showing where that money
Yeah.
is going, so why couldn't we just
Yeah.
say 950, it's the
I'm sure you
budget
can.
plus this and this,
Yep.
right? That would make sense.
And as long as you're not advocating one side or the other,
Right.
and that's not the
it's not the
intent
intent.
here.
Yeah, it's not the intent
Is that-
on anybody's part,
No,
really.
it's just to give the information so that everybody's aware of where that number is
Is
derived
there
from.
another way that you can do it besides email? Being a senior citizen, and so many senior citizens in town that do not do email. I hate to say it, but they're the ones that are gonna vote, and as Mark said, hit down.
So the problem is using resources, right, Dee?
I know.
So we can, we can print out the FAQ page and we can have it at the senior center for people to pick up, and copies at the library for people to pick up. And if someone asks us for information, we can provide them as much and however they want their information. Problem becomes, and this has come up at other questions, right, is can you mail it to people? I can mail you the date of the meeting, and we could do that in a light flyer, right? But doing anything more than that, I mean, and we could, I don't know, I can ask legal, I'm not comfortable making that decision, right? And putting ourselves
But
in,
if it was available at the senior center or at the library, as a handout.
Yep.
Right.
Type of thing, that would be great.
we can certainly do that.
We would just have to print it, it would have to be printed by the Friends or.
Well, I think we can print it because it's just an
If
informational.
it's just informational, then
Just
we can.
information.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
if it said vote yes, then we can't
It's a
print
different
that.
situation,
Advocating
right.
for one side or the
Yeah,
other.
yeah. No, I think you make a valid
People need-
point, Dee.
We'd have to use Mark's printer, Mark's house, and Mark would have to do it.
Just email it to me, I'll print it, I don't care.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, I mean, I'd love to see something like that get.
So now we know that we can't do what we didn't want to do anyways. I'm going back to make the offer of writing a 45-word
Yeah.
You promise it's only 45?
flyer. This is what the 950 is. No promises on the 45. But one sheet of paper.
He's giving us editorial authority, so it's fine.
Am I pulling up your sheet?
Oh, do you have something started already?
No.
Oh.
But I think we have another issue, I think, at hand, because my impression was at the last joint meeting, we didn't just vote on the 950, we voted on the composition of what the 950 was. And I think that's changed in the last week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I have this particular schedule right here, and plus a matter of disclaimer here, I'm not a Facebook aficionado, but social media picked up on our meeting pretty quickly in terms of, well, I thought it was $1,150,000, why is it $950? And I thought the budget, the deficit was, $840, and now it's $800. I think we need a little explaining to do. So this is the cleanup on aisle 6, I think, is what the intent is. That the first one is, in no disrespect to the $1,440,000 not being on this sheet, but that was the one that they weren't making the comparison to. So the point is, well, what was the makeup of the $1,150,000? And you can see in item 1, there it is. There was the deficit, there was capital depreciation, stabilization, ambulance, and then there's the $1,150,000. So where'd we come up with the $950,000? And the $950,000, which is number 2, in the detail of that in number 3 is we reduced the budget from $840,000 to $800,000. We reduced the capital depreciation from $150,000 to $50,000, stabilization from $100,000 to $90,000, ambulance from $60,000 to $0, and we increased the reserve from $40,000 to $50,000. So there's the $200,000 delta, explaining to those that may want to know what's the difference between $1,150,000 and $950,000. Now comes the issue of the misinterpretation of the Bay Path, reduced assessment. There was an understanding at one point that that was for FY '25, which would cause the budget deficit to be reduced. Now we've determined it applies to FY '24, so the budget deficit is not 800,000, it's actually $825,500. I took the liberty of dropping $11. So now the question is, do we need to, I hate to use the phrase that I'm going to use, we need to live with the 950 because that's what we voted on, and that's already in print in the ballot question, and we've met all the statutes. But now the composition of that needs to change a little bit. And technically, the reserve fund is a budgeted cost center. So you actually have to add that to the deficit. So in truth, the deficit is $835,500. So now we have $124,000 to divvy up between capital depreciation and stabilization. And allow me the liberty of saying this. It was invoked at the last meeting that stabilization funds are looked at by the bond company. I'm not going to go into the 4 criteria that they look at, of which that is one. But the truth of the matter is, the true name of the capital depreciation fund is the Capital Depreciation Stabilization Fund. It is a stabilization fund. Generally, you have a general stabilization fund and special purpose stabilization funds. That's what we have. We've just called it something different. So we could accomplish the same thing with respect to appeasing the bond companies if they look at all of our stabilization funds in total, and I just think consideration should be given to putting the whole thing to capital depreciation stabilization fund, because I think we're going to need to knock on that door during that particular year, and it would be nice to have it there for that emergent problem of breakdown in equipment and still accomplish what we all wanted to do a week ago, was to put it into stabilization. I think it gets better use under the capital depreciation stabilization. And if you look at our special revenue funds, which I'm not going to ask you to call up, Heather, but if you did, it's literally what it's called on a published report on our website. So we're still at 950. I think we need to readjust what the deficit is. It's not 840 and it's not 800. It's because of those two things that are identified in item number 4. And I think we ought to give some reconsideration as one member of FinCom. We don't have a quorum, and I'm not speaking on behalf of those that are not here. But I think splitting it and putting 50 in capital depreciation, which doesn't do us a lot of good, and 64 in the general stabilization, which really doesn't replenish it to the extent that we took out a year ago, we go 0 for 2 for accomplishing something, whereas if we put it all in capital depreciation, because once again, I think a 35, 38-year-old dump truck is going to knock on our door in the next 12 months. That's my personal opinion.
So the reality with for instance, a dump truck, unless we have, I don't know, 400, 500,000 sitting in capital,
Yeah.
you're not funding that through capital anyway.
Well, the one that we're speaking of is, we're not talking about a Freightliner, which is that, no, we're talking about a dump truck, which I think was presented to capital at $187,000. This would give us about $156,000 if that were the case.
Yeah, I mean, I think even at that number, we're going to be,
Gonna have to
we're
borrowing.
looking for borrowing at that point, rather
Or
than
lease.
extinguishing
Yeah,
our.
which-
Or lease.
Which,
Yeah.
I want to take that word out of play. If we have to do anything here in mixing this up that relates to any borrowing and any additional burden on the taxpayers, I don't think we're in favor of that. I just think this accomplishes more, because maybe something from the reserve fund could help subsidize that, and now we can replace that truck. I'm not even sure that it's going to be there, but if it is, we've got nowhere to turn, where this gives us a place to turn.
The thing about it being in a stabilization, it can be used for any other emergencies, whereas capital, it can only be used for capital.
Yeah,
Item.
purchases, right?
So you've got more flexibility.
Yep, good point, but the counterpoint, Carol, is you generally put stabilization in there so that you don't have to use it, where you put it into capital so that you can use it.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I'm just saying that you can't draw from the capital for a budget deficit, can you? So you do need the stabilization fund to be,
Yeah, not
because it's
suggesting
multi-purpose,
Yeah.
whereas capital isn't.
Well, if you look at item number 5, I just think it's, the only one that I've changed here is the budget and the stabilization. Originally, we were going to put in a lot more, and now we have to reduce it by the amount of the budget deficit increase and the amount of the reserve fund.
Yeah.
So question is, what good does 64.5 do us that a better use wouldn't be putting that same 64.5 in capital depreciation? Just giving you my opinion. I'm not going to go to the mat on it, but I just think we get better play, having served on both committees, finance and capital depreciation.
I mean, I think we heard from the vast majority of all the committees at the last meeting that we were all sort of on board with wanting to get money put back into stabilization that we had drawn out to try to replace it so that we maintain that fund. I'm not opposed to, where we have a different budget gap number that we're working with now. I'm not opposed to modifying the number, but I still think we need to put a substantial amount back into stabilization. The other thing that I think we need to make sure we don't lose sight of is that we're not the ultimate authority of where this money, how much money gets put into what fund, right? That is a town meeting is the appropriating body for that money. So my suggestion would be that we focus on the 950 number, and then as we get closer to town meeting, when we need to make sure that we have warrant articles drafted and whatnot. Are we still looking at June 10th as the date for warrant articles?
Yeah, so June 10th, the day for warrant articles, but then the decision and we talked about this a little bit at the joint meeting, there's always the option, particularly with the budget question, that if we're not sure of those numbers yet and we want to give more time, we can put it on as I know we don't like it, some sum of money. But then that would buy us time until we got to town meeting and could make a motion.
Yeah. And then you can fill the number in.
The good news is unlike some prior recent meetings, we have time to think about this. We don't have just till Monday at 5 o'clock, we have until the closing of the warrant articles.
Right.
The 950 is a lock. Question is, how do we want to compose that?
Yep. Yep. Yep, I agree.
However we use it, it's needed. So
Definitely.
it's not that we're going for more than we
I
need.
mean, we could
Yeah.
even just take the 114 and split it down the middle and put one here and one there.
Certainly an option,
6 in one, half dozen the other.
for sure. Certainly an option.
I didn't hear what you said.
I said we could certainly take the 114, I think that's 114.50 or whatever, 500.
Right.
Split it down the middle between the two. I mean, it's 6 in one, half dozen the other. I do appreciate what you're saying about putting it all in one and not in the other, but I also feel like we need to send the message that we're being fiscally responsible and trying to put some back into the,
Well, even though I took the liberty of speaking how I feel, I didn't take the liberty of putting it on the screen.
No, I understand.
I adopted what was talked about a couple of Fridays ago. But the 114.5 is the one that has to play. Do we have it the way it appears in item number 5? Do we split it in half? Or do we put it all in capital depreciation? That's the question. But I think there needs to be clarification of what the heck is the budget deficit? I mean, we were hopeful that it was going to be lower, but unfortunately, the Bay Path good news was misinterpreted in terms of which year it applied to. So,
Yeah. So you're meeting tomorrow.
yes.
Are you intending to discuss this particular issue tomorrow, I assume?
We're meeting primarily tomorrow to talk about year-end transfers, of which there are many.
Yeah.
But I took the liberty in the agenda to make sure that if we had time and wanted to talk about this, it's on the agenda, we can do that.
Okay,
So my hope is to at least put it out there,
okay.
yes.
Sounds good. All right, anything else on the budget while we're here? Or are we satisfied with where we're at?
No, I think the only thing I would say, so Mark, FinCom's meeting tomorrow, are you guys intending to meet the following Wednesday?
I think we'll address that tomorrow night.
Okay.
We have some serious business commitments with 2 members, literally out of the country. So even Zoom would be great, except it's, 3 AM where they are right now, and that's.
I think I got a high school graduation next Wednesday to go to.
Right, so I
think.
think it's a challenge, so I don't want to promise you, but promise you that it will raise the issue.
So even if, as long as we can cover things tomorrow, I think that's the biggest piece, right? We need to finalize, make sure FinCom's on board with whatever the final budget numbers are, if there's going to be final budget numbers based on what we already have out there. Jeremy, you're giving me a facial look.
I am. I thought 950 is 950.
No.
About the budget.
The budget, where the 950
Not the
go.
balance.
Understood.
Not the override, the budget.
Yep.
So of that $825,
understood.
$24,500.
Gotcha.
Is everyone still on board with where the money's going? And in the event we have a reduced services budget and end up going with that at town meeting, is everyone good with that budget as it is? So if we can do that and FinCom has enough time, and they're comfortable enough with that, then I think we would have a motion or a warrant article with numbers for the select board's next meeting on June 10th. If we're not able to do that tomorrow night, which is fine, and we're not able to meet the following week before the June 10th, then that might be time to consider just putting the article on as a kind of a blank sum of money's one, to give FinCom more time to meet. Because we want to make sure we have the meeting of the minds there and everyone's on the same page. And then the only subsequent thing I would add is that, I would be looking for some direction from the select board as to how much you want me to push the information out there, but like we did last time, right? We did a presentation before the select board. Mark has a different opinion than I do of how successful our information sessions were. We had like a zillion of them. But we can certainly try those pieces again if we think they're helpful. I mean, every person we get the information out to, they generally talk to their neighbors, their friends. So, I think the word spreads a little bit more than one person at a time.
So I think that we might be, and this was a suggestion that came from the public as well, we might have more success if we dedicate one meeting, one particular night to just an information session.
Okay.
And ideally maybe at the school, right? Not here, not as part of a select board meeting, but a dedicated information session just for that purpose, well advertised,
Put it on town sign.
in a similar place where we hold our town meeting, so that we can invite people to come in and have that forum, where they can ask questions, we can provide a short presentation, whatever it is that we want to do. And then ideally, we would have FinCom there, Select Board would be there, department heads would also be there.
Okay. Do we have an idea of when we want to set this up?
I would be open to whatever, is a Monday night the night, because that's typically when we do town meeting. A weeknight versus a weekend. I don't know that a weekend is, especially this time of year, is a good option. But probably a weeknight would be my guess.
Maybe the third week in June, maybe?
So the question is how close, first of all, how soon before town meeting do you want to do it, or town election?
Yeah, before the ballot, right? So it'd be before the 24th.
So if it was a Monday, it'd be the 17th. That's,
So just keep in mind that we're still mailing 500 or so absentee or early voting ballots. So they haven't gone out yet. They haven't come in yet either. But the question becomes is, do we want to try to get an information session before people get the ballot and vote on something that they may not have all the information on? Or do we say that ship's kind of sailed either way and we worry about after the fact and just town meeting folks? Because it seemed like that might have been the audience we were missing last time, right? Is the folks who had their ballot in advance but may not have caught up with the information sessions. It's all speculation, but I'm
If you
guessing.
look at the split of yays and nays on the mail-in ballots, it was actually closer than it was for the people who didn't do mail-in ballots. So, so oddly, it seemed like either that portion of the population was more favorable, or they got the information one way or another. But I don't want to do it too far away from the ballot vote. I think it's important to do it probably in the week before the ballot vote. As for the mail-in ballots, when do those go out? But keep in mind also that
Gotta come back.
they have to come back, right? So they're going to have them in their hot little hands for a while before they send them in, right?
Yep.
So when do we have any idea? On
We
when?
don't have them in yet, so usually
Okay.
they go out pretty soon after they come in.
Yeah.
I talked to Lori this morning, there's no tracking number on them yet, so she thinks either, the very end of this week or next week. More
Okay.
likely than not next week.
Okay. And then do we know what the last day is for mail-in ballots for them to be received?
8 PM on the day of the election.
It is the absolute day of the election. So they have quite a bit of time to send it in. And so if we still have this informational session, now understanding that not everybody is going to wait to send in their ballot, but if they know that there's an information session coming up, and we advertise it well, then they may choose to attend said information session before sending their ballot in.
It's fair. I think the important part of getting an idea, or at least finding a range of a date, and I can work with everyone's schedules offline.
Yeah.
Will give us an ability to advertise that date in advance. So people can start looking for it. Neil will be so excited, we'll put it on the sign.
He will love to see it on the sign. Can you ask the finance committee tomorrow what day works for them? I'm fairly flexible. But hopefully we can get as many people there as possible. Demonstrate a united front.
Yeah, I think the important thing is that those sessions, if FinCom is represented, we don't need all 7 members. If we had 2 members, that would be, because we're not holding a formal meeting, we're just being part of the presentation,
Yep,
so.
Okay. All right.
yep. I mean, I think the more the merrier, but
Yep.
it is what, right? Like, if not everybody can make it, then not everybody can make it.
Right.
So I'd say probably after June 18th, because I think that's the last day of school.
June
So that will make it easier.
19th's a holiday, right, town hall's closed.
Oh, yeah, so I wasn't even doing that math. I was just saying
So you could say
sometime after.
2021, and then you're into the next, Monday's the 24th.
Yep,
So we can, Dawn and I can work tomorrow. We got to figure out when the school's available.
it is, that only gives us a couple of days, but to work
What
with.
about, yeah, Monday the 17th? You want to do a Monday? It's a week ahead of time.
Yep. It's an option, so.
All right, I'll circle back with everyone offline. Let's just, if it's okay, let's have a goal date before June 10th to be able to announce on June 10th and start publishing it
Yep,
before then. But I'll work with folks offline on a good day, and we have to figure out availability at the school.
right,
Because if we pick a date now and then they say they're not available, now we're confusing people.
right, yeah,
I don't want to do that.
all right. Good. Any other budget issues before we leave this topic? Things we can actually tackle? No.
We're good.
Okay, excellent. All right, so that's it. We'll move on. Under new business, we have to sign the warrant for the election on June 24th, 2024. Do we have that? Yeah. Let's do it. Might as well just do it. And we have some year-end transfers as well. Did I skip something? I'm sorry. Am I going out of order? Okay, thank you. And there's the transfer request. All right, so do I have a motion to sign the, what is this? Motion made by Kirk and seconded by Carol to appoint the above-named person as an election. Oh, this is it. This is different. Oh, I'm confused. I'm like, oh, is this? All right, okay, never mind. So is there a motion to sign the warrant for the election on June 24th, 2020?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Now, year-end transfers. Let's do this. Oh, it was in there. I'm sorry. I just missed it. We'll sign when we sign everything, I guess. Okay. So we have 2 transfer requests. This one is coming from the town hall in the amount of $10,955 from health insurance premium, which has a balance of $172,000 roughly, to MIS purchase services, which currently has a balance of $4,109.75. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The second one is also coming from the town hall in the amount of $3,420, requested to be taken from WRSD assessment with a balance of $18,652 to legal, which is currently fully expended. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so we have that. Just leave those there. Okay. Potential articles for special town meeting. I think we kind of glossed over that a little bit at the last, with our budget discussion. We're going to have, it's going to depend, what's on there is going to depend, or what we're voting on is going to depend on the outcome of the election. So we'll have the budget article that is contingent on an override. We'll have a backup article that is the
Non-contingent?
non-contingent on the override article, right? But then we're also going to be looking to have some articles to place money
Into funds.
into capital and stabilization, ideally.
And I think Brian had suggested those be within the same article.
they can go in the capital request and the stable, and the,
I believe so.
Can
But
we be
I'll
same
work
article?
with him on those, yep.
I don't know if I think I might like it separate.
I don't know if we're gonna have the opportunity to have it separate,
Oh,
because theoretically, so when I had the conversation with him about the 950, because we
Yeah.
talked about how we wanted to move money into the stabilization accounts. And we talked about how we could potentially put the the language in the election ballot, right, to do that. The problem is if you include the language in there to put into the stabilization fund, it becomes very similar to what we did for the road stabilization fund a few years ago. And it becomes appropriated always for that purpose. As opposed to the general question of the 950 for town whatever is only appropriate for the first year for that specific purposes, and then it just becomes part of the coffers. When it's dedicated year over year, it means every year you would be appropriating, that $60,000 into capital stabilization that would always gain 2.5%, and the only thing you could do with that, just like the road stabilization.
that's not what,
But you-
that's
but
not
you're
what I'm
talking
talking
about the
about.
ballot. About the
I know, I
Right.
know, but this is why I cover that, right? So that's what Brian said, that's why we didn't go that direction, we just did the blanket 950. He said if you want to do the transfers, you can do them, but you have to make them as if they're a line item budget,
But
as part of our regular budget to do the transfer
wouldn't
if
we
you're
be
taking.
using the free cash to transfer into those accounts? Doesn't that eliminate the issue?
Well, you could, but then you would be you wouldn't be appropriating all of that 950. Or are you saying okay, I see what you're saying.
We're just
You're
saying-
saying reduce the total amount that you're okay, probably.
Okay,
I'll work with Brian on it.
okay. Just trying to
I
make
don't see why
that
there's,
simple.
I know, I agree,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
So yes, theoretically, if you did that and it was just free cash articles, then it could be separate ones.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it easy and simple to,
Let's raise and appropriate.
right. Okay. Any other potential articles for special town meeting that we need to worry about?
Not unless you want to pursue we'll call it the red book.
I think we just said
I
we
don't-
didn't want to do that.
I don't think anybody's in favor of doing that. Yeah,
So that's all I have for now.
okay, perfect. All right, I have nothing under old business. I have no select board correspondence.
You,
do I?
under new business, Julie, on the modified one, there's the revised one from Friday, there's the award, the FY 2501 paving contracts.
Oh, I don't have that, okay.
That's okay. It's on the revised one on the web. On your table there, each of you, I just handed out my TA report, mostly because it has the chart in it. So I'm just gonna pull it up on the screen for people.
Appreciated. Got it. All right, so we're still under new business then. So there's a request to award a bid for the FY 2501 paving contracts. 15 entities requested the IFB for the contract. 8 companies actually placed a bid. The bids should be awarded as follows for item, and these are lowest bidders, right?
Yep.
For item 1, bituminous concrete, mass broken stone for the amount of $268,066 for FY '25 with an option to renew for FY '26. Item 2 is reclamation to Murray Paving and Reclamation in the amount of $53,126 for FY '25 with an option to renew for FY '26. And item number 3, asphalt cold planing, mass broken stone for the amount of $53,126 for FY '25 with an option to renew for FY '26. And so, I guess we're looking for a motion to award those
So moved.
contracts. Is there a second?
Second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then the second page, you just see the breakdown, all the bids that came in. And then down below, I also did, because you guys asked this question last year. So what was the difference in the bidding price per ton and per yard for the vendors for this year versus last year? Last year, we did not do cold planing asphalt, so I couldn't compare it. I didn't go pull the year before. But this year was 91.72 for bituminous concrete. Last year, same vendor won it, Mass Broken Stone, $80.48, so a 12.3% increase from last year to this year. The Murray Paving Reclamation was $3.28 this year. Last year was $3.09 per square foot. square yard, rather. The other thing that was different in this bid is, this is for 2 years, this isn't just for one. So it's for the first year with the option, but the second year, Mass DOT made us do the amount that we expected for the 2 years. That's why the number's a little bit higher. As well as the other difference was when we did the bidding, Travis wanted us to account for paving or with the bituminous concrete. It was the first one, yeah. Going around like the manhole covers and a couple of the specifications, like the gates or whatever you want to call them. So we had to come up with an estimated number of how many we thought there would be for people to bid on. So it's more than just the bituminous concrete and the total number. That's why I broke these out a little bit separate so people could see the different pieces.
Can we just go back to that bid, unless I might have misheard you?
Sure.
But the figure for item 3 is incorrect. It should be
I was,
so 806. Did you?
no, I was marveling at the fact that they were the same number.
Oh, because I wrote the wrong number.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's why.
Can we go back and do that vote again?
Yep, let's do that again. So,
Which one did I mess up here?
Third one.
so it should be mass
52,806.
broken stone for item 3, which is asphalt cold planing, should be, the amount is 52,806. So if I can get a motion to award that amount for mass broken stone on item 3 as a
Amendment.
amendment to that.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good. Thank you, Carol. Good catch. I was like, wow, they really bid the exact same amount on both of those things. That's amazing. I probably should have said something. Okay. All right, so anything else in the town administrator's update?
Let's see what we got. Paxton Days and the Summer Jam coming up June 15th, 10 to 8 p.m. Be a very exciting time. Donna's worked very hard along with Kathy on these pieces. Again, in case you didn't hear the plug last time, music, food, games, food trucks, and other vendors. 11 to 2 will be Off the Hook Roadside Eatery. 1 to 6 will be the Ultimate Grill. And 7 Saws will be serving on a one-day liquor license from 3 to 6. Summer Music Series kicks off on July 11th with Paul.
Cochain.
Court chain, yeah.
Yep, sure. 6:30 to 8:30, more information online for those pieces. There will be a couple of them that I think they put in or will be putting in a one-day liquor license for 7 Saws, but not on July 11th, so don't get overexcited on that one. Procurement, we just talked about the paving contract, so we're all set with that. And then there's, the same job openings we had last time and openings on boards and committees. And if there's any questions, folks are encouraged to contact me and we will find them either a job, a board committee volunteer place, or, public service hours of some sorts.
There was that gentleman who reached out to me at town meeting. Did you?
I have been in touch with him and we'll be meeting later this week or early next week.
Awesome. Good. Thank you. Before I forget, because I have written it now down twice for myself to remember, we want to make sure that we thank the members of the Memorial Day Committee, which really is a ad hoc sort of put together, not a formal committee, for all of their efforts in putting together the Memorial Day celebration this year. I think all 3 of us were there. It was lovely, despite the fact that it was a little bit wet.
It was New Englandy.
It was New Englandy, yeah.
Cold again, though.
And it was, honestly, there was quite a showing
Yes.
despite the weather,
Yeah.
which is very nice to see. It was a lovely presentation as always. And, we had several students from Paxton Center School who came and either sang a song or read some poetry. Very, very nice presentation. So thank you to everybody involved in that. We also had, of course, the parade to start with all the antique cars. I know our own town clerk was there with their Model A. And, of course, Public Safety came out in strong form with their parade as well. So thank you to everybody for that.
Appreciate
And thank you to
everything.
Roger for,
Yeah.
emceeing the ceremony as he usually does, so.
Great job. Everybody did a great job.
Yeah, it was actually very nice. I looked around, just a note, there was a number of people that I saw with not dry eyes during this. So, I don't know, it was moving certainly for a lot of people, so thank you, everybody. All right. Public comment? No, they're excusing themselves. No comments from Dee.
I just wonder if it doesn't pass, if you've gone that next step to look and see what's gonna happen.
You have. Yeah, it's not pretty. But as, I mean, with that amount of money on the table, there's no way it's gonna be pretty, right? But whether it passes or not, we're gonna find a way forward and we will make it work. That's all that I can say, right? The town will still be here. You will still be getting some element of services. It's just not going to be the same as it was. That's all. Yep, and I think, if you want more information about that, there is a presentation, which, I can't stand that echo. There is a presentation that several of the town departments put together, and it's available on the website that details where the cuts would be made. You're welcome. All right. Hearing no other public comment, we can have a brief recess before we move to our executive session.
So moved.
Motion to go into it?
Oh, let's do that.
Make a
Right,
motion
thank you.
to adjourn only to, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, we
Make a
have to
motion
actually
to
make the motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the general session only to return to executive session, to return to general session only to adjourn.
Only for the purpose of adjourning.
Yeah. Where's my sticky note?
Okay, so the motion is to move into executive session only to return to regular session to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
It's seconded, and
Aye.
this needs to be a roll call vote. How do you vote?
Aye.
Kirk, aye, yeah. Carol?
Aye.
And I will vote aye. All right, so we're going to move into executive session.
Yeah, stop
Have you
this.
signed them?